the day, so if I can revert to Bill 82. Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would move that Bill 82, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, motion to move back to the Committee of the Whole House on bills without amendments.
There's a motion on the floor. Mr. Johns.
Yeah, just for clarification, we do support the concept of the energy. We will be voting against it because of the fact that we feel that the Water Commission meeting, who will be administering it, need to be open to the public.
There's a motion on the floor. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. Bill 65, the Psychologist Act. Mr. Todd Leader. Welcome, Mr. Leader.
Thank you, sir.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So my name is Todd Leader. I'm the president of the Association of Psychologists of Nova Scotia. The changes that are in front of you are proposed by the Nova Scotia Board of Examiners in Psychology. So essentially, one is the one that's proposing the changes is the regulatory body, and I represent the membership of psychologists across the province. The Association of Psychologists is generally in favor of the major change that is being proposed here, and the major change being that instead of the Association of Psychologists appointing members to the Board of Examiners, the Board of Examiners will now undertake to hold its own elections to fill its own seats. So historically, this is a major change because the Board of Examiners in Psychology was actually created by the Association of Psychologists, and the appointment process served us well to keep the two organizations connected, which is important for the profession. So this change, where the association does not get to appoint to the Board of Examiners anymore, creates a disconnect between the two organizations that actually ensure safe and effective psychological services to the province. So in lieu of us appointing, what we are asking for as a change to what's proposed there is that one seat on the Board of Examiners be added as an ex officio seat for the president or designate of the Association of Psychologists of Nova Scotia. That's not what's proposed by the Board of Examiners, but they are aware that that's what we are asking for. And by creating that ex officio position, then we guarantee a formal connection between the two organizations into the future, as we have already had that for the past, but this move would disconnect us unless we have that extra seat, so that we have that formal means of communicating with each other. So that's number one that I'm asking that be changed from the proposed legislation. The second thing is that we would like to make sure that there is a clause being put in that relates to good conduct or good character. I forget the word. It's fairly common in most regulatory kinds of legislation, but it carries with it great risks depending on how it's worded, because, well, for instance, if it's worded very abstractly and not very specific, then what could end up happening, if you end up with people who are, let's say, morally conservative on the Board of Examiners, and some psychologist ends up having 3 or 4 drinks out at a restaurant with his wife one night, and somebody sees him and files a complaint, somebody on the board might determine that to be of bad character, when in fact it's private time and it's not, you know. So we, the Association of Psychologists, would like to be directly involved in the construction of any wording around that clause, so that we can ensure that it both protects the public and protects psychologists from frivolous complaints. that are inappropriate. The Board of Examiners in Psychology that is proposing these changes to begin with, they have a single function. That single function is the protection of public. And so putting in a clause of that type, regardless of wording, will protect the public. As the association, we're concerned with also, not instead of, also protecting psychologists because of the risk there. And those are the two things that we would ask for as changes to the legislation. Otherwise, we do support what is proposed on the condition that those two are added or taken into account.
Ms. Zann.
Thank you. I just wanted to know if you have any amendments handy that you wanted to make to the bill.
There is a letter that we submitted that probably is in your pile because the Board of Examiners said that they provided it.
Yeah.
So, so that's all we have in writing on this.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Thank you much. Thanks, Todd, for coming in. I'm just wondering, through the process of getting bill number 65 ready, how much consultation was done with the Association of Psychologists?
We were provided with the information about the changes, and we were given the opportunity to provide comment back to the board on that.
Okay, and and those comments would have...
They took the form of that letter.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Porter, and I'll come to Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Leader, for your presentation and the information provided. I would suggest probably there's a bit of discussion to be had yet on this bill, and I would move, if it's appropriate, to defer to the next Law Amendments Committee meeting to afford that time to take it to where it needs to go for further discussion, at least around the committee table one more time. So I would so move, deferring it to the next Law Amendments meeting.
There is a change sheet. Do you wish to have the change sheet distributed for consideration given these circumstances? Ms. Roberts.
I think at this point I would support Mr. Porter's motion because we need to clarify if these changes, there's been a bit of, I think, lack of connection between all the different members on our committee, and I'm not sure if this exactly maps on to what Mr. Leader just asked for. So I think we would like to have some time to clarify our own amendments, because one of these certainly reflects a change that that the witness just asked for, but the other one I'm not certain that it does. And so, yeah, I think if we could defer this, that would be good. Thank you. And also, can I just clarify, when the clerk distributed this letter, I understood that it was from this witness, but in fact this letter appears to be from the Nova Scotia Board of Examiners, which is not this witness. So I'm feeling like we're actually missing a letter from the Association of Psychologists of Nova Scotia. This is clearly from the Board of Examiners, which
I was told that it was provided to, that it was part of the package submitted when the Board of Examiners submitted their information.
So I think that is a second reason why deferring to another day would be good.
That's their actual proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Mr. Porter.
No, I just appreciate the honourable members' comments, and given those comments, all the more reason that it should be deferred back just for some further discussion, and we get it where it needs to be in the next meeting. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. There's a motion on the floor to defer for consideration at a later date. All those in favour indicate by saying aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Leader.
Thank you very much.
Bill 107, the Labour Standards Code. Mr. Jimmy Bray. Welcome, Mr. Bray. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to make 2 quick points this afternoon. The first point is that clause number 6 of Bill 107, as it reads now, will not help poor people. The second point is that the balance between protecting employees and putting a fair burden on employers must also consider the impacts of poverty. My name is Jimmy Bray. I'm a law student and also a clinical student at the Dalhousie Legal Aid Clinic. For those of you who don't know, the Legal Aid Clinic provides legal services to people with low incomes, does community outreach, does lobbying, and does test case litigation in order to combat injustices affecting persons with low incomes in Nova Scotia. As I said, I'm a student at the clinic and I'm also a board member. And I'm here today to speak to Clause 6 as it was introduced. As you know, this clause states that employees are entitled to an unpaid leave of absence if the employee or a child of the employee experiences domestic violence. I suspect all of the honourable members will agree that domestic violence is a serious issue in Nova Scotia, which has serious impacts on the lives of those that experience it. We'll all agree that domestic violence disproportionately impacts women, and we all agree that taking some substantial steps to ease the burden of domestic violence is important. And I propose that everyone around this table can agree on a fourth thing, which is that poor people, people on fixed incomes, and the working poor cannot take unpaid leave in cases of domestic violence. The Dalhousie Legal Aid Clinic delivers family law services to people who can't afford a lawyer. The clinic deals with child custody, child protection, divorce, and separation on a regular basis. Many clients of the clinic have experienced domestic abuse in one way or another, and all of the clients of the clinic are poor. Many clients of the clinic struggle with paying their bills. Many struggle with balancing paying their rent, electricity, phone bills, and any other bills they have. And for many people, the end of each month is a delicate dance where they must decide which bills to pay and which ones can be put off for just a little while longer. For a person in this position, taking unpaid time off of work to deal with the practical or emotional fallout from domestic violence is just not an option. In particular, leaving situations involving domestic violence means taking a financial hit. In some circumstances, it might require moving. A person might need to make new arrangements for childcare, or they might need to deal with the loss of an income to their household. I think personally, and on behalf of the clinic, that the legislation before this committee is incredibly important. It acknowledges an issue that's fundamentally important to improving life in our province, but I also think we should be careful. I think that we must be extremely cautious of turning fleeing from domestic violence into a luxury that only people with disposable income can afford. The second point that I'd like to make quickly is that the balance between protecting employees and putting a fair burden on employers must also consider the impacts of poverty. Mr. Kasoulis, on April 5th, speaking in the legislature, referred to the challenge of striking a balance between providing the right protections to our employees and ensuring that our businesses can effectively manage and provide those important protections. I agree with this. A balance must be struck. But respectfully, I submit that this balance must realistically consider the positions that workers are in. When we talk about striking a balance, are we including, when you talk about striking a balance between protections for workers and the ability of employers to support those protections, are we including low-wage workers in that conversation? Are we including workers without savings in the bank? And are we including workers with children that they must look after? I'm realistic about the possible outcomes of this provision of the bill. As it stands now, domestic violence leave is unpaid, and I certainly know that in Ontario, up to 5 days can be paid, and similarly in Manitoba. So the bar is not high. The bar is not high. 5 days is not much, but even a few days of unpaid leave might be enough to tip the balance for someone who's considering leaving a situation involving domestic violence. Ladies and gentlemen, the final version of this bill must contain provisions for paid domestic leave.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. Questions? Ms. Roberts?
Thank you very much for your comments, and we have spoken in the House in favor of paid leave. I believe that a good number of employers are in fact providing paid leave for their employees. I guess, could you speak a little bit to the inadequacy, though, of that being done on really a volunteer and goodwill basis by some employers?
Certainly. As everyone around this table knows, the Labor Standards Act, Labor Standards Code sets a floor for the behavior of employees, or of employers rather. And for a lot of employees who work for responsible businesses or organizations, that floor is not particularly relevant. But for other employees who work in low wage circumstances or who work in precarious positions, that floor does matter. So I think it's fair to say that certainly there are businesses and organizations who have both the best of intentions and the ability to follow through on those intentions, but there are other employers and businesses who, for various complicated reasons, don't. And employees who work for those businesses are left vulnerable as a result.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. Ms. Zann.
Thank you. Just quickly, I know that this is a concern of our caucus, and as my colleague mentioned, we have mentioned this already on the floor. I would like to make a motion to send this back to the department for consideration because of the very reasons why this witness has given us. It doesn't cover a lot of people in the province of Nova Scotia who really need help. And as we know, domestic violence is a huge problem here in Nova Scotia and as elsewhere. And if we really want to do right by the workers of Nova Scotia with regards to domestic violence and the help that they need, I think that we give them the due to send this back for consideration with the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zann. Mr. Jessam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, really goes without saying, but I think we can all agree that the issue of domestic violence is something that should be taken with the utmost seriousness. That, again, goes without saying. Mr. Bray, I just wanted to acknowledge, I guess, the work that you're actively doing and your expertise in speaking on behalf of likely many clients who would be perhaps in a scenario where poverty is something that they have to deal with on a daily basis. So, you know, not being a lawyer, and certainly for me it's helpful to hear stuff like that, but I did respectfully want to I guess highlight to the committee members that the minister has committed to exploring the possibility on a go-forward basis, and has subsequently stated that it is important to move forward on this bill in its current form, because this specifically does protect the ability for people to take to retain their job when they're going through this type of a process. So I think there's a general awareness that there could be merit, but I do not believe that it's government's position that we stop the process on this particular bill. Rather, it will be consulted on at a future date.
Thank you, Mr. Jessam. Ms. Zann.
Thank you. And with all due respect to my Liberal colleague opposite and what he said, I think that since this bill is actually coming forward, we should do it right, do it properly, and include everything that we can in order to protect the women and other workers of Nova Scotia. And I think sending it back to the department for consideration, instead of just moving it forward straight away back to the House, would be the right thing to do on behalf of women who are at risk in Nova Scotia.
Thank you, Ms. Zann. There's a motion on the floor to defer the bill for consideration at a later date. Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the honourable member's point, and Mr. Bray as well for your presentation and making those points. And I certainly would agree that there's an opportunity to defer it to at least the next law amendments meeting for some further discussion. I'm not sure when that will be, but I would assume sometime in the not too distant future. But I think we could agree to defer it for some further discussion as it stands right now.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Mr. D'Entremont.
Thank you. In that spirit, if the government looks like they want to at least consider, we did have a number of amendments that we wanted to do to the bill, and they do revolve around the issue of actually paying the individual, at least for the first 5 days. So not only receive the leave of absence, but also to receive some funding from the employer, not necessarily forcing them, but asking them to actually do it. And there's a second proposal there in this LAC PC-1 when it comes to maybe changing the employee's hours of work, making as much accommodation to the victim, to the employee, so that they can of course get their lives in order if they are a victim of domestic dispute, domestic abuse. So I just wanted maybe for consideration that the department can bring that back and we can discuss it at the next meeting.
So there's a motion on the, I'm sorry, Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there is also a shorter sheet of amendments proposed by our caucus that would include both provision for 5 days of paid leave and also maintenance of contributions to benefits for an employee who needs to take a leave under that section. So hopefully the department can consider both of those, and so can the Law Amendments Committee when this comes back.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. There's a motion on the floor to defer for consideration at a later date. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion's carried. Thank you, Mr. Ray.
Thank you very much.
The next bill is Bill 99, the House of Assembly Act bill. I would remind those in the audience who weren't here at the opening, there are headsets available at the back for purposes of translation. Please feel free to utilize one of those to your advantage. And a reminder to committee members that to control the translation service, on the upper left-hand corner of your microphone deck is a manual switch to move between channel 0 and channel 1 for purposes of translation. The first speaker, Monsieur Norbert Leblanc. Welcome, Mr. LeBlanc. The floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Mon nom, c'est Norbert Leblanc. Je suis un Acadien fier de la région de Paramba. C'est un plaisir d'être invité ici pour pouvoir parler à ce comité, à ce groupe, pour pouvoir exprimer nos inquiétudes. Mon rôle avec la communauté acadienne de par chez nous est que je suis le président du Conseil acadien de Paramba. Ça fait peut-être une dizaine d'années que j'ai cette position-là. Ce n'est pas à cause que je suis tellement doué, mais c'est à cause qu'il n'y a personne d'autre qui veut le faire. L'histoire des Acadiens en Nouvelle-Écosse, et en particulier dans la région d'Argyll, se continue. C'est une histoire centrée sur le désespoir et sur la lutte pour ses droits. Ce n'est pas la première fois que les Acadiens de notre région doivent se regrouper et demander à l'autorité gouvernementale de leur accorder leurs droits. Pour les gens de la municipalité d'Argyll, nous voulons être très clairs. Nous voulons réclamer notre ancien district électoral d'Argyll et nous ne lâcherons pas avant que nous réalisions cet objectif. Les résidents d'Argyle, dans les dernières années, ont vécu un cauchemar. Je vais le traduire pour mes amis en anglais, a nightmare. J'ai apparu en avant de la commission législative qui ont mis la commission ensemble, qui a recommandé l'abolition des circonscriptions protégées. J'ai apparu en avant de la commission McNeil à Tuscott, en avant de 300 à 400 personnes, pour demander de garder notre circonscription. J'ai apparu en avant de la commission McNeil à Yarmouth, en avant de 2500 personnes. J'ai attendu les arguments de ne pas diviser Yarmouth. 2500 personnes dans Yarmouth, c'était une grande représentation. Les arguments ce soir-là, c'était à tout prix, il ne faut pas diviser Yarmouth. Mais qu'est-ce qu'on fait d'Argyle? Il y a un conseiller de la ville de Yarmouth qui a eu l'audace de suggérer qu'on devienne une circonscription avec Argyle-Barrington. C'était un conseiller de la ville de Yarmouth. J'ai apparu en avant de la commission sur la représentation effective par chez nous. Puis on parle dans le rapport de la représentation effective des concepts de marginalisation systématique. C'est pas de quoi de nouveau. Puis j'aimerais vous citer une partie, si vous voulez me permettre. La marginalisation est le fait de créer et de maintenir un climat social où le groupe dominant est considéré comme la norme ou le centre. Ils ont apparu en avant de la commission Theresa McNeil. Ils ont été très spécifiques qu'ils ne voulaient pas perdre leur circonscription électorale. Ils ont perdu cette bataille et le gouvernement de la journée a avancé son projet d'éliminer les circonscriptions protégées. En nous référant à la page 7 du mémoire de la Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse, nous soulignons que la Cour d'appel de la Nouvelle-Écosse a déclaré que l'abolition de circonscriptions électorales acadiennes était inconstitutionnelle et que le procureur général de la Nouvelle-Écosse avait outrepassé ses pouvoirs en ordonnant à la Commission de déposer une nouvelle vision. Imaginez-vous, si vous étiez dans nos souliers, qu'on a reçu une décision de la Cour d'appel que le processus ne respectait pas la Constitution. Puis, à un temps donné, on recevait des experts qui venaient nous dire qu'il faut avoir une représentation égale à travers la province basée sur un pourcentage, avec aucune considération pour la communauté acadienne. Il est maintenant dépassé le temps de corriger ce mal et de remettre notre circonscription d'Argyle. Nous constatons que le mariage forcé du fusionnement d'Argyle et de Barrington ne marche pas pour avancer les intérêts de ces deux régions. Pour ceux et celles qui étaient présents lors des consultations de la Commission sur la représentation effective à Tuscott en 2017, ces gens ici pourront constater que les gens, mes amis de la région de Shelburne, ne sont pas contents d'avoir eu leur ancienne circonscription divisée en deux et annexée par les territoires voisines. Imaginez-vous, Yarmouth ne voulait pas être séparé du tout, Shelburne ne va pas être séparé, puis là ils disent Argyle, ça ne nous concerne pas. Heureusement, la Charte des droits et des libertés canadiennes est là pour nous protéger. En ce qui regarde la possibilité de créer des circonscriptions non contiguës, Nous disons que c'est rêver en couleur. On se rappelle de la première rencontre du conseil scolaire Claire Argyle et j'étais présent, il y a plusieurs années de ça, quand les représentants de Claire ont sorti de la réunion pour contester les représentants d'Argyle qui parlaient en anglais. Les réalités politiques des deux régions sont différentes et de côté pratique, était logique d'avoir un Acadien d'une région représenter les besoins des Acadiens de l'autre région. Pour nous, la réponse est simple. Remettons la circonscription acadienne, les circonscriptions acadiennes qui existaient autrefois dans le Sud-Ouest. En conclusion, nous nous référons au paragraphe numéro 47 du mémoire de la FAN. Afin de rétablir la confiance des Acadiens dans le processus démocratique, afin de s'assurer que la voix de la communauté acadienne soit entendue à l'Assemblée législative, la FAN enjoint le comité de modification aux lois, c'est vous autres, de retirer le projet de loi, la disposition permettant à la commission de délimitation des frontières électorales de regrouper des circonscriptions non contiguës. Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie au nom de mon association que je représente pour votre attention et nous vous invitons de communiquer avec nous pour expliquer davantage nos positions sur toute la question. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. LeBlanc. Mr. D'Entremont.
Merci beaucoup, Norbert. Merci pour être venu te présenter tes mémoires. Comme tu as déjà fait plusieurs fois, quand tu as la citation afin de rétablir la confiance des Acadiens, comme on sait, ça c'est une étape dans deux autres étapes. Ça, c'est nos trois étapes de celui-ci. C'est le changement du projet de loi, c'est des réunions d'un comité spécial et puis la commission même. Donc, la communauté va avoir besoin de se présenter plusieurs fois dans ça. Trouves-tu que la population est prête et pas peut-être ennuyée, dérangée de tous ces processus que le gouvernement a pas écoutés dans le passé?
Bonne réflexion de ta part, député d'Entremont. Il y a une chose qui me chatouille un peu, c'est après que tu es victime d'être abusé, tu acceptes que c'est de même que les principes de vie se déroulent. On a été sur des montagnes russes, un roller coaster. Tout d'un coup, je me rappelle, le premier rapport McNeil, on était en haut. Il recommandait la protection des circonscriptions protégées. Et puis là, lo and behold, il y a eu des directives de revenir. Puis je peux vous assurer que les Acadiens étaient découragés à ce temps-là. On a perdu ce qu'on pensait qu'on allait regagner. Mais ta question est bien claire. Est-ce qu'on se décourage? Je peux te dire qu'il y a encore du feu dans mon cœur. Je peux te dire également, hier, dans mon temps libre ou avant-hier, j'ai communiqué avec la municipalité, leur dire que ça se passait ici, voir si qu'elle était encore on board. Et la municipalité d'Argyle était un de nos partenaires essentiels et importants dans tout le processus. Ça sera à nous autres de nous assurer qu'une fois que la commission que vous allez créer se déplace à travers la province, qu'on se présente de nouveau. Mais il faut penser, combien est-ce qu'on peut faire ça de fois?
C'est la question.
Oui.
C'est depuis les années 70 qu'on fait ça. On a longtemps. C'est même avant ça. Même les années 60, 50.
On n'a jamais mentionné, si vous voulez, Monsieur le Président, qu'à la réunion de la représentation effective, nos amis de Shelburne ont dominé une discussion dans Argyle.
Ouais.
Et c'était, moi je croyais, pour traiter la question de représentation effective, et puis ça a été complètement débalancé, déséquilibré pour un tiers de la réunion, au début, si je peux dire ça.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc.
Thank you.
Ms. Roberts.
Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. Votre député est ici, alors je ne vous demande pas de lui critiquer. Je suis sûre qu'il est un bon représentant. Mais j'aimerais savoir comment est-ce que vous avez vu les impacts du changement qu'on a eu en 2013? Quand vous cherchez à être représenté par votre député, le fait que la circonscription est bien différente qu'avant.
Bonne question. Ça serait intéressant de voir combien est-ce qu'il y a de députés acadiens qui sont élus à travers la province, qui siègent ici à Halifax, numéro 1. Numéro 2, ça qui est arrivé dans 2013, ça va prendre pas mal longtemps à oublier. On avait un ministre des Affaires acadiennes que les gens valorisaient. Tout le monde a connu M. Steele. Il est venu chez nous faire les arguments et c'était un homme très intelligent et un homme qui avait fait sa recherche. Et on lui a demandé à 3 reprises de faire des circonstances particulières pour notre région. Et la réponse était toujours la même. Il faut respecter le nombre de citoyens en Nouvelle-Écosse divisé par le nombre de sièges, et puis on pourrait avoir une variance de 25%. La question de communauté, d'intérêt, n'a pas survécu la journée.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc.
Thank you.
Mr. Porter.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. LeBlanc. Thank you very much. My French is not as good as it should be, but I wanted to thank you for your presentation, your passion, and the fire in your heart. We look forward to the further communications that we hear today.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc.
Officially?
Yes, sir. The next speakers, Ghislain Boudreau and Marie-Claude Rioux. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les députés, je m'appelle Ghislain Boudreau et je suis le président de la Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse et je viens aussi de la même circonscription que Norbert discuta, de la circonscription Argyll, Parambo et Barrington. La Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse a été créée dans le but de promouvoir l'épanouissement et le développement global de la communauté acadienne et francophone de la Nouvelle-Écosse en collaboration avec ses membres, composés de 28 organismes régionaux, provinciaux et institutionnels d'expression française. Et on a été incorporé le 14 octobre 1968, donc c'est le 50e anniversaire cette année. D'ailleurs, vous trouverez dans vos trousses, on a les lettres d'appui de différents organismes. On a celle de la Fédération des femmes acadiennes de la Nouvelle-Écosse, l'équipe d'alphabétisation de la Nouvelle-Écosse, l'Association du Centre communautaire de la Rive-Sud, le Conseil communautaire du Grand Havre, la Fédération culturelle acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse, le regroupement des aînés et aînées de la Nouvelle-Écosse, la Société acadienne de Clare, la Société Saint-Pierre de Chéticamp, le Conseil acadien de Parambon, dont vous venez d'avoir la présentation, Et on a aussi des représentants des organismes dans la salle, et il se peut que je n'en manque, mais on a aussi représentants de l'équipe alphabétisation de la Nouvelle-Écosse, le Conseil communautaire du Grand Havre, la Fédération culturelle acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse, regroupement des aînés et aînés de la Nouvelle-Écosse, Société acadienne de Clare, le Conseil acadien de Paraba, l'Association francophone de la vallée d'Annapolis, Immigration francophone de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à notre directrice générale, Marie-Claude Rioux, qui va par la suite expliquer notre position.
Merci. Ça ne marche pas.
Le micro à Mme Rioux ne fonctionne pas.
Je vais changer de place, s'il vous plaît. Ah, là, OK, ça va. Alors, bonjour. Et merci, Ghislain. Alors, comme vous pouvez voir avec la liste qu'on vient vous donner, c'est très clair qu'il y a toujours le feu au niveau de la communauté acadienne et qu'on est toujours autant engagé. Les Acadiens sont présents depuis 1604. On n'a pas lâché, on ne lâchera pas. Voilà pour mon commentaire éditorial. Maintenant, juste un peu de mise en contexte sur ce qui nous amène aujourd'hui. Alors, suite au dépôt du rapport de la Commission sur la représentation effective, la Fédération acadienne a préparé un projet d'amendement à la loi sur l'Assemblée législative qui tenait compte des recommandations de la Commission. Ce projet d'amendement a été présenté à un groupe de travail composé des leaders en Chambre, de la ministre des Affaires acadiennes et du ministre des Affaires afro-néo-écossaises. Une seconde réunion a eu lieu par la suite, au cours de laquelle le leader en Chambre pour le gouvernement a présenté diverses modifications apportées au projet de loi, sans que la Fédération acadienne ait l'occasion de réagir de façon efficace et pertinente, puisqu'on n'avait pas de document en main propre. La Fédération acadienne a appris par la suite que 2 importantes modifications ont été apportées au projet d'amendement, à savoir le sous-alinéa 5BF, qui indique que la Commission de délimitation des frontières électorales peut autoriser les circonscriptions non contiguës, et le sous-alinéa 5CC, qui prévoit que le comité spécial fixe le nombre maximal et le nombre minimal des circonscriptions électorales. Vous comprendrez que la Fédération acadienne s'oppose fortement à ces 2 modifications. Elle estime qu'avec ces 2 dispositions, le projet de loi ne respecte pas l'esprit de la Commission sur la représentation effective et qu'il risque de marginaliser, encore une fois, la communauté acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Donc, dans un premier temps, pour ce qui est de la disposition relative aux circonscriptions non contiguës, qui figure au sous-alinéa 5BF, la Fédération émet de sérieuses réserves pour les raisons suivantes. Le sous-alinéa 5BF prévoit donc que les circonscriptions électorales peuvent être non contiguës. C'était une recommandation, effectivement, de la Commission de la représentation effective. Sauf que il y a une loi sur les gouvernements municipaux ainsi qu'une loi sur l'éducation qui accorde à la Commission des services publics et de révision de la Nouvelle-Écosse le mandat de définir aussi des districts, de définir des limites. Or, la Commission sur la représentation effective n'a pas du tout consulté le Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board, la Commission des services publics et de révision. Alors, et je suis convaincue que si on les avait consultés, on aurait dit qu'il n'y a pas de circonscription ou de district non contigu et qu'on aurait expliqué pourquoi c'est pas logique de faire ça. Cela dit, on trouve nous aussi notre propre logique à ne pas inclure des circonscriptions non contiguës. À notre connaissance, d'abord, il n'y a aucune circonscription non contiguë dans le pays. Alors, en soi, c'est une bonne raison. Ensuite, comme Norbert l'a mentionné, la fusion du Conseil Clare-Argyle, ça a déjà été fait et ça a vraiment été désastreux comme exercice. Alors, on sait qu'on ne peut pas demander à une région de représenter une autre région. Je vais vous donner un petit background historique. Vous savez, quand les Acadiens ont eu la permission de revenir en Nouvelle-Écosse après la déportation, C'était à condition de ne pas constituer de groupe suffisamment gros pour constituer une menace. C'est pour cette raison que vous avez des Acadiens dans Clare, dans Argyle, dans Chéticamp, dans Richmond et qu'ils sont éparpillés à tous les coins de la province. Pour cette raison-là, les Acadiens n'ont jamais eu la force du nombre qu'il y a au Nouveau-Brunswick. Et pour cette raison-là, ils ont leur propre personnalité. Donc, vous ne pouvez pas demander à quelqu'un d'Argyle de représenter quelqu'un de Clare. Ça ne se fait pas. L'accent est différent, la façon de vivre est différente. Ensuite, on considère que bien que la Commission de délimitation des frontières électorales est jugée indépendante, l'histoire nous a appris, comme vous le savez, avec la récente décision de renvoi sur l'abolition des circonscriptions électorales acadiennes protégées, que cette commission n'est pas nécessairement protégée des pressions politiques et que, ce faisant, les possibilités de gerrymandering demeurent toujours très possibles. Maintenant, pour ce qui est de la possibilité du comité spécial de fixer le maximum et le minimum des circonscriptions. Le sous-alinéa 5CC prévoit que le comité spécial peut déterminer le maximum et le minimum des circonscriptions électorales que la commission peut considérer. On tient à vous mentionner que le gouvernement justifie cet ajout en indiquant que la recommandation faisait partie du rapport de la Commission sur la représentation effective. Cette affirmation est fausse. Ce n'est pas vrai. Ce que la recommandation de la Commission dit, c'est qu'elle donne plutôt le mandat à la Commission. Elle donne le mandat au comité spécial de donner le mandat à la Commission de créer le maximum et le minimum des circonscriptions électorales. Donc, si vous lisez clairement la recommandation de la Commission, ça n'a jamais dit que c'est au comité spécial de fixer. Ce que ça dit, c'est que le comité spécial peut autoriser la Commission à fixer le minimum et le maximum. Alors donc, vous comprendrez que si vous regardez l'alinéa 5CC et 5DD, il y a vraiment une confusion entre les deux. Et ce qu'on estime, c'est qu'en fixant le nombre maximal de circonscriptions électorales, le comité spécial vient à toute fin pratique menotter ou entraver de façon importante le travail de la commission. À supposer que le comité spécial dise qu'actuellement c'est 51 circonscriptions et que le maximum est 51 circonscriptions, on ne peut pas aller nulle part avec ça. Donc, selon la Fédération acadienne, l'ajout de ces deux dispositions de façon concomitante crée une situation qui risque de marginaliser davantage la communauté acadienne et d'éliminer toute possibilité du retour des circonscriptions électorales acadiennes protégées. La Fédération juge également que l'ajout de ces deux dispositions dans le projet de loi forcera la communauté acadienne à comparaître, encore une fois, comme Norbert l'a dit, non seulement devant la Commission pour faire valoir l'importance de récupérer nos circonscriptions, mais en plus de sortir les arguments qui nous appellent aujourd'hui ici. Les arguments pourquoi on ne peut pas avoir des circonscriptions non continues. Les arguments pourquoi ce n'est pas le comité spécial qui devrait fixer le maximum et le minimum. Alors, vraiment, ce que ça vient faire, c'est de demander à la communauté acadienne de porter encore une fois le fardeau de justifier pourquoi elle existe et pourquoi ces choses-là sont si importantes. Alors, la Fédération acadienne estime qu'actuellement...
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Oui.
You may continue.
Je terminais, Monsieur le Président. Donc, la Fédération acadienne estime que la communauté est encore une fois victime de calculs politiques et on déplore ce qui pourrait être interprété par certains comme du dédain, du mépris ou de la condescendance à l'égard d'un peuple fier dont la contribution n'a pas à être justifiée. En conclusion, nous demandons au comité d'avoir la sagesse de retirer du projet de loi le sous-alinéa 5BF, de retirer du projet de loi le sous-alinéa 5CC, de consulter la Fédération acadienne pour ce qui est de la nomination de un ou de plusieurs Acadiens à la Commission de révision des frontières électorales et de mettre sur pied, dans les meilleurs délais, suite à l'adoption de la loi ainsi amendée, une commission de délimitation des frontières électorales. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames, Messieurs, on vous remercie de votre attention.
Merci, Madame. Mr. D'Entremont.
Merci beaucoup, Marie-Claude Gislain, pour votre présentation. J'ai deux questions vraiment, elles ne sont pas nécessairement les mêmes. Premièrement, c'est la question que j'ai posée à Norbert. On sait que la Fédération acadienne même, avec leurs membres, sont prêts à battre le battre pour être ici pour les présentations, pour être là pour la commission quand ils vont faire leur tournée de la province. Mais trouves-tu pas que les Acadiens sont un peu dérangés de la décision de 2012, qui sont vraiment un peu fatigués de reprendre ce débat ici à tous les fois?
Très clairement, vous savez, je crois que la légitimité de la démocratie en Nouvelle-Écosse a été remise en question en Acadie. Et ça, je trouve ça déplorable. Vous savez, il n'y a pas si longtemps, la communauté acadienne était un modèle en matière de votation en Nouvelle-Écosse. On votait à 95 à certains endroits, 96 qu'on m'a rapporté. En fait, ceux qui ne votaient pas, c'était ceux qui étaient à l'hôpital, c'était à peu près ça. Okay? C'était un exercice que tous les Acadiens faisaient. Depuis 2012, le taux de vote dans les circonscriptions électorales acadiennes est descendu à en bas de la moyenne provinciale, en bas de 53 %. Alors, je pense que c'est un exemple qui montre à quel point les Acadiens ont cessé de croire dans l'appareil démocratique. On vous demande de rétablir cette confiance-là. Parce qu'une confiance, c'est une relation mutuelle. C'est votre tour maintenant de rétablir cette confiance.
Mon deuxième partie de cette question-là, même je suis d'accord de sortir le 5BF, les circonscriptions non contiguës, mais je vais poser la question sur 5C.
Oui.
Quand ça vient à le nombre maximum et minimum de circonscriptions. Si le gouvernement, si le comité dit écoute, on veut 52 et 48, ou on veut 55 et 51, qu'est-ce qu'on pense que la décision va être? Ils vont prendre le maximum pour essayer d'avoir le medium ou l'average de ces commissions-là. Donc, la difficulté dans celui-là que je comprends, mais peut-il l'expliquer un peu différent peut-être?
C'est exactement ça. C'est ce qui se passe actuellement. C'est si le comité législatif fixe un maximum, la commission n'osera pas nécessairement aller dépasser ce maximum-là. Si le comité spécial détermine que c'est 51 sièges, qui est le maximum, et que, d'un autre côté, vous avez une possibilité de créer des circonscriptions non contiguës, ben bingo pour la commission sur la représentation, sur la délimitation, ils vont faire, OK, ben comme on peut pas aller plus que 51, on va jumeler Clare-Argyle, puis pourquoi pas Chétican-Inverness. Ça ne marche pas chez nous. OK, c'est pas ce qu'on veut. Alors, et ce qu'on vous dit, c'est que quelque part, laissez à la commission son travail. Pensez-vous sérieusement que la commission de délimitation des frontières électorales va tout d'un coup vous arriver avec 70 circonscriptions? Voyons, c'est des gens qui sont bien choisis, c'est des gens qui sont intelligents, c'est des gens qui vont faire le tour de la province, qui vont réfléchir à la question et qui vont soumettre un rapport aussi songé que celui sur la commission sur la représentation effective. Et, cela dit, ne croyez-vous pas que les Acadiens ne méritent pas 4 sièges à l'Assemblée législative? Vraiment, sur les 51, vous trouvez qu'on vaut moins que ça?
Merci beaucoup.
Ms. Zann, we are out of time, but I will allow one more question.
Oh, thank you. First of all, I'd like to apologize for what was done before by our earlier government. I felt that it was the wrong decision at the time. I believe that the Acadian people have been put under tremendous pressure and have been treated so disrespectfully for so many years that their culture and their should be protected, and their language and their way of life. So I personally feel very, very sad about this. And it is interesting to hear your presentation today. I think that we need to get this right. We already messed it up once. Let's get it right this time. And let's not put these poor people through another whole venture of abuse. So, and having to explain their very, the importance of their own existence. So I would very much like to make a motion to send this back to the department, to have them consider the 5CC and 5BF and putting some Acadians on the commission and consulting with the Acadians in these areas in much more rigorously because we don't want to get this wrong again, and I believe we owe it to the Acadians of Nova Scotia. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Zion. Mr. Porter.
Thank you. I think it's appropriate before we move with any motion, just my opinion, but I'd like to hear, there's 3 other presenters that have come some distance that I would like to hear from. This is an important piece, and there's lots and lots to hear here, and I think it's vitally important before we move any motions or vote on anything, Mr. Chair, that we definitely hear from our presenters, and thank you.
Mr. D'Entremont.
I agree with that. There's other presenters here that I'm sure will have some similar things to say, but I think it's valuable to hear them as well, rather than entertaining at this moment the NDP's motion in an effort to try to save face for something they did to the Acadians back in 2012. I don't appreciate it when a member comes and tries to save face in this manner, but let's listen to the other folks first before we make a motion on that one.
Thank you, Mr. D'Entremont. I think, in fairness to those who've taken the time to be here, it is appropriate that they be extended the opportunity to be heard. So we will defer Ms. Zan's motion until presenters have completed their presentations. Thank you very much. Ms. Zan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to respond to that and say this is nothing about saving face. This is about being true to oneself and what one believes. And I believe that that's what we're voted in for. That's what we're here to represent the people for. And I'm being absolutely honest and straightforward when I make this motion. Let's get it right this time. And yes, let's defer the motion till the end after everybody has presented, but I would like that motion to go forward at that time.
Thank you, Ms. Zan. Mr. Daniel Thériault. Welcome.
Bonjour.
The floor is yours.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, Monsieur et Mesdames les députés. Je laisserai une lettre mémoire signée par la présidente de la FACAN, Nathalie Robichaud, afin que la voix de la communauté acadienne soit entendue à l'Assemblée législative et de rétablir la confiance des francophones de la Nouvelle-Écosse dans le processus démocratique en y ayant une représentation effective. La Fédération culturelle acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse souhaite faire part à la province de la Nouvelle-Écosse qu'elle appuie les positions de la FAN, qui ont été expliquées tout à l'heure dans son mémoire. Soit, je les répète, parce que je pense que c'est important, de retirer du projet de la loi la position permettant à la Commission de délimitation des frontières électorales de regrouper les circonscriptions non contiguës, de retirer du projet de la loi la position permettant au comité spécial de fixer le nombre maximal et le nombre minimal de circonscriptions, de mettre sur pied, dans les meilleurs délais, suite à l'adoption de la loi, ainsi amendée, une commission de délimitation des frontières électorales. La FECAN est un regroupement d'organismes culturels œuvrant au développement culturel et artistique de la communauté acadienne et francophone de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Elle regroupe une vingtaine de membres et une cinquantaine de membres associatifs et une cinquantaine de membres artistes. Et pour cela, c'est pour ça qu'on a tenu à... on fait une brève présentation, mais je pense que en maintenant la communauté acadienne vivante, c'est qu'on maintient une culture. Je pense que pour qu'une culture se maintienne et que la langue soit préservée, mais aussi la culture, les sociologues nous parlent de complétude institutionnelle. Ça veut dire qu'il faut, dans tous les secteurs, que la communauté linguistique et culturelle soit représentée, soit visible. Et je pense que le secteur politique est un secteur important et je finirai en disant, je ne veux pas trop rabâcher sur le passé, mais dire qu'il y a eu une première tentative de faire disparaître la culture acadienne en Nouvelle-Écosse. Malgré cela, l'Acadie et la communauté acadienne et francophone ont donné une contribution historique et culturelle importante à la diversité de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Et si j'étais à votre place, je ne voudrais pas participer à une deuxième tentative de la faire disparaître. Merci beaucoup. C'est bon.
Thank you. If you may remain for questions. We're not going to let you off that easy. Questions? Ms. Sand.
Merci. I apologize. My French isn't well enough to be speaking in public yet, but I would like to ask you, could you just again, please reiterate the importance of keeping our culture, our Acadian culture, alive and well after all of the difficulties that they have experienced from the British and everything, why it's so important that we actually make sure that, say for instance, 5CC, 5BF, that we make sure that we get this one right this time.
Donc, avec la communauté acadienne, avec l'histoire de la communauté acadienne en Nouvelle-Écosse, vous avez, dans l'Amérique du Nord, un des groupes européens les plus importants qui s'était installé, des premiers groupes qui s'est installé en Amérique du Nord et qui s'est développé une identité, une culture et qui forme une nation. Et je pense que maintenant, ça fait partie de la richesse et de la diversité de la Nouvelle-Écosse et que et pour les droits des Acadiens et Acadiennes, on doit leur donner la protection qu'il faut pour qu'ils se maintiennent comme communauté linguistique et culturelle et donc une représentation politique efficace et réelle et donc c'est un peu ça la justification. Aussi, comme je disais, il y a des raisons sociologiques, c'est-à-dire on ne peut pas maintenir une langue et une culture si on n'est pas visible dans la société. Et c'est ça l'importance pour une minorité comme la communauté acadienne, mais les autres minorités aussi présentes en Nouvelle-Écosse, mais où ici on parle de l'Acadie et de la communauté francophone de la Nouvelle-Écosse.
Merci, j'apprécie beaucoup.
Mr. Jessup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et Monsieur Thériault aussi. Merci pour votre présentation aujourd'hui. Ça, c'est très important pour les considérations de la comité et la présence politique acadienne, c'est très important pour Nouvelle-Écosse. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Mr. Constanzo.
Merci. Madame Marie explique quelque chose qui m'intéressait beaucoup. Pourquoi les Acadiens sont partout dans la Nouvelle-Écosse? Ils ne sont pas dans un quartier central. Mais est-ce que les groupes sont d'accord pour avoir seulement un représentant pour
comme les représentants de la FAN l'ont expliqué tout à l'heure, en fait, au niveau... quand il y a des circonscriptions, il y a des circonscriptions régionales et pour représenter des réalités régionales et locales. Puis je pense que bien qu'on participe à un groupe qui se veut une nation, mais comme le Canada est une nation et comme d'autres groupes, par exemple comme les Autochtones forment des nations, il faut, les circonscriptions sont pour représenter des intérêts régionaux et locaux. Et donc, il faut que les circonscriptions respectent les communautés d'intérêt. Et dans les communautés d'intérêt, il y a l'identité, la langue, la culture, bien sûr, mais il y a aussi d'autres facteurs économiques qui, des fois, ne sont pas partagés par toutes les mêmes régions. C'est pour ça qu'il faut maintenir les circonscriptions qui respectent des communautés d'intérêt. C'est ce que... C'est ce que j'ai à dire sur votre question, mais je vous remercie.
Alors, vous êtes content s'il y a une représentante par tout le monde?
Non, c'est-à-dire que je pense que la position, nous, on appuie les positions de la FAN, donc la position de la FAN, c'est que de maintenir des circonscriptions où où il y aura plusieurs députés acadiens et acadiennes ou qui représentent les intérêts des Acadiens et des Acadiennes.
D'accord.
Et francophones, bien entendu.
Merci.
Ms. Roberts.
Merci beaucoup et merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. La communauté plus grande maintenant acadienne en Nouvelle-Écosse, je crois que c'est ici à Halifax et Dartmouth. Comment est-ce que vous voyez leur représentation en question de culture, d'éducation, etc. Comment est-ce qu'on accomplit qu'ils soient représentés dans leur intérêt vis-à-vis la culture, la langue, l'éducation?
Oui. C'est sûr que ça, c'est une situation assez complexe et je pense que la vie francophone à Halifax est aussi dépendante de la vitalité des régions acadiennes. Et je pense qu'il faut considérer que les régions acadiennes ont une histoire, une identité et des intérêts particuliers. Éventuellement, ça c'est une autre question et je pense que la FAN a demandé s'il y a un représentant acadien sur les structures qui vont amener les modifications et si la communauté francophone et acadienne dans le milieu d'Halifax, dans le grand Halifax augmente, ben, il faudra peut-être, on pourra prendre ça en considération dans les années à venir. Mais j'ai pas de, c'est sûr que c'est une autre question, je pense, là, et je pense que tout de suite, on aborde plus la question des régions acadiennes qui avaient des circonscriptions qui ont été enlevées. Éventuellement, on pourra peut-être reprendre une discussion comment les francophones des milieux urbains peuvent être représentés, là, mais je ne pense pas que c'est le sujet à régler tout de suite. Oui, je ne suis pas en mesure de le régler, mais c'est une question à réfléchir.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Thériault.
Merci.
Brenda Pickup. Welcome, Ms. Pickup.
Merci beaucoup.
The floor is yours.
Merci. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les députés, je m'appelle Brenda Pickup, née Boudreau, anciennement du comté de Richmond au Cabreton, mais demeurant présentement dans la municipalité régionale d'Halifax. Je suis la présidente du Conseil communautaire du Grand Havre. Le Conseil communautaire du Grand Havre existe depuis 1991. Il a comme mission de promouvoir le développement global de la communauté acadienne, francophone et francophile de la municipalité d'Halifax. Par ce mémoire, le Conseil communautaire du Grand Havre, le CCGH, appuie les démarches de la Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse au comité de modification des lois afin d'assurer que la voix de la communauté acadienne soit entendue à l'Assemblée législative. Le recensement de 2016 dévoile que la population de la municipalité régionale de Halifax est à 387 395 résidents, dont 76 485 sont d'origine acadienne et française, soit 19,3%. Plus précisément, 1 sur 5 résidents. Le CCGH est conscient qu'un bon nombre de ses membres proviennent des régions traditionnelles acadiennes de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Ainsi, en ce sens, un ou une députée élue par région acadienne représente également les Acadiens et les francophones qui résident dans la municipalité régionale de Halifax. Nous vous remercions sincèrement de votre attention. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Ms. Pickup. Miss Roberts.
Merci beaucoup et c'est un plaisir de vous voir encore une fois.
Et vous pareillement.
Est-ce que vous pouvez commenter si, donnant votre situation, votre locale à Halifax, est-ce que vous êtes en faveur des... qu'est-ce que vous en pensez auprès de toute cette vraiment difficile situation de comment balancer les votes et la représentation des Acadiens dans les régions traditionnelles qui perdent leur population vis-à-vis Halifax? C'est vraiment, sincèrement, c'est pas clair, c'est pas facile d'arriver à une bonne solution.
Oui. Je pense que la meilleure façon de pouvoir clarifier, c'est de vous conter une petite histoire. En 2003, j'ai déménagé ici à Halifax. Très peu après, mon père a déménagé avec moi parce qu'il a préféré que je sois la gardienne de ses affaires. Il était âgé. Mon père était ancien combattant de la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. Au fil des années, mon père a eu besoin de services. Mon père parlait français, parlait anglais aussi, mais était beaucoup plus confortable dans sa langue maternelle, qui était le français du comté de Richmond. Dans le temps, le député bien respecté était l'honorable Michel Sanson, et mon père a décidé qu'il voulait faire un appel téléphonique au député Sanson. Le député Sanson connaissait mon père parce qu'il venait de la même région. Il parlait la langue de mon père, qui n'est pas le français de Chéticamp, qui n'est pas le français de Argyle, ni le français de Clare. Ils sont tous différents avec leur propre expression, avec leur propre accent. Mon père était très confortable et c'était très important pour lui. Maintenant, aujourd'hui, est-ce que mon père aurait eu la même chance de contacter quelqu'un qui parle sa langue, qui connaissait sa famille, que lui, il connaissait la famille du député? Je ne pense pas. Très important que les Acadiens soient bien représentés dans chaque région, dans chacune des 4 régions. Et que si, à un moment donné, nous ne pouvons pas avoir un député francophone ici à Halifax, au moins, les personnes qui habitent ici, qui sont traditionnellement acadiens de une de ces 4 régions-là de la Nouvelle-Écosse, auraient l'occasion de jaser et de communiquer avec quelqu'un de leur région. Et en terminant, je veux juste vous dire que ça existe encore des régions en Nouvelle-Écosse où tout le monde se connaisse.
Merci.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Merci beaucoup. J'ai une question, mais j'ai un commentaire vite. Si ton père voulait parler à quelqu'un de Richemont qui peut parler comme Richemont, Madame Pond, qui est derrière toi, parle français très bien de la région Richemont. Donc oui, elle pourrait faire ça. Deuxièmement, la région métropolitaine de Halifax, oui, c'est fait de beaucoup de personnes un peu partout de la province, mais le multiculturalisme qui se fait aussi. Et je pense au Carrefour, on voit ça souvent. Penses-tu que les Acadiens ou les membres de l'Assemblée acadienne représentent ce que eux ont besoin? Si tu me comprends, là, peut-être ils sont un peu... Ils ne comprennent pas vraiment le fait acadien, mais ils sont des francophones en même temps. Et on a besoin de les représenter avec les régions. Ça se représente comme ça.
Les Acadiens sont des Acadiens qui parlent français.
Ouais.
Il y a une différence entre les Acadiens et les francophones. Ouais. Et puis, j'accepte bien votre explication pour député Pond, Madame Pond, sauf que la conscription n'est pas une conscription particulière présentement. Ouais. On est chanceuse qu'on a eu un francophone qui s'est présenté. Ouais. Okay? Et puis, au sujet de votre question, là, je m'excuse, mais ce n'est pas clair.
OK, merci.
OK.
Mr. Constanzo.
J'espère que je peux le faire tout en français, mais je veux te demander qu'est-ce que tu penses pour... Moi, je vois que tous les Français de différentes régions de Nouvelle-Écosse sont ici. Ils ont l'école Beaubassin, ils ont l'église. C'est un environnement où tous les Acadiens de différentes régions ils sont ensemble, ils parlent même. Ils sont, pourquoi on dit toujours c'est ici la division? Moi, je pense qu'à Halifax, c'est un exemple pour avoir les Français ensemble, pour l'unité, pour être plus fort, pour conserver la langue, pour être les enfants jouer ensemble, connaître les autres. C'est une belle chose d'avoir tous les Français ensemble. C'est pas la chose que vous voulez, un représentant qui peut unité. C'est l'unité que est-ce que c'est important pour toi, pour vous?
Oui, je comprends très bien ce que vous êtes en train de dire. Et puis ici à Halifax, c'est vrai qu'on se rassemble.
Oui.
Et puis on est tous très fiers de notre propre langue, de nos propres expressions. Mais moi, comme Acadienne de la région de Richemont, je veux définitivement garder ma langue. Je veux définitivement garder les expressions de mes parents et de mes grands-parents. Je veux garder les traditions et la culture qui est... Mais les traditions, c'est un peu différent. Un exemple, à Noël, la veille de Noël, nous autres, on va à la maison et on mange le pâté à la viande. Ça ne va jamais changer, ça. Okay? Mais dans la circonscription de monsieur, c'est la râpure. À Chéticamp, c'est peut-être autre chose. Parce que le pâté à la viande à Chéticamp, c'est tout à fait différent que le pâté à la viande de chez nous. Alors, il y a des traditions que nous voulons garder, malgré que on se réunisse, on se supporte les uns les autres, parce que, dans le fond, nous sommes tous des Acadiens et des Acadiennes.
C'est ça. Merci.
Ms. Zan.
Merci. Just to clarify, you are in favor of the amendments that the Fédération Acadienne de Nouvelle-Écosse have submitted?
On behalf of the CCGH, yes, we are in favor.
Thank you. Merci. J'apprécie beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Pickup.
Merci pour m'avoir accueilli. Bonne journée.
Elaine Timo. Timot, welcome. The floor is yours.
Bonjour, mon nom est Elaine Timot. Ça dit, je pense, sur l'ordre du jour que je suis la directrice générale de la Société acadienne de Clare, mais je viens juste de prendre ma retraite, donc je suis maintenant membre de la Société acadienne de Clare. Donc, bonjour, Monsieur le Président, Messieurs et Madame les députés. La Société acadienne de Clare œuvre depuis plusieurs années, depuis 2001, dans la région, pour valoriser la langue et la culture francophone de la région de la Baie-Sainte-Marie. Nous avons plus de 200 membres et 55 associations membres, auxquelles appartient aussi notre conseil municipal. À la Baie-Sainte-Marie, c'est un endroit où on peut vivre pleinement sa langue et sa culture acadienne dans tous ses aspects. Et comme Monsieur a dit au début on a suivi toutes les commissions, tous les groupes qui sont venus dans nos régions. On a fait des présentations, on a rempli le gymnase de l'Université Sainte-Anne, on a pleuré ensemble, on a fait toutes des démarches et on est encore ici aujourd'hui. Et s'il y en a d'autres, on va être là. Donc, la municipalité et la Société acadienne de Clare, on travaille étroitement ensemble. Pendant qu'on a fêté le Canada 150 l'année dernière, on a eu diverses conférences autour de la Constitution canadienne de 1867. C'est triste que 150 années plus tard, on doit encore se trouver à avoir besoin de défendre les mêmes préoccupations qu'on fait depuis 1867. En ce qui concerne la représentation effective des Acadiens et francophones de la législature de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Historiquement, depuis la formation du Township of Clare en 1838, nous avons élu un député acadien à la législature de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Et cette année, la dernière élection, c'est la première fois que la municipalité de Clare n'a pas élu un francophone à la législation de la province de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Depuis ce temps, la municipalité est toujours reconnue comme la seule municipalité acadienne française en Nouvelle-Écosse et qui mène toujours ses affaires en français. Si nous prenons en considération le fait que les Acadiens de la Nouvelle-Écosse ont établi la première colonie en Amérique du Nord, que nous sommes un des deux peuples fondateurs du Canada, que nous sommes protégés par diverses clauses de la Constitution du Canada, des droits et libertés de la personne, ainsi que la loi des langues officielles. Et moi, je peux vous dire que je m'ai battue pour du début, pour nos commissions scolaires, pour mes droits de l'éducation de mes enfants en français. Et je continue toujours. On a les droits, on est chanceux qu'on a un peu à peu les droits qui nous protègent. Quand plus nous vivons dans un pays appelé le Canada, et qui est reconnu à travers le monde pour respecter les droits fondamentaux de la personne. Il n'est pas raisonnable qu'en 2018, nous sommes toujours en train de nous battre pour avoir une circonscription à nous, afin d'être effectivement représentés au sein de notre population. Nous avons perdu notre circonscription électorale en 2012 et simplement dit, nous voulons la reprendre parce que c'est notre droit. La Société acadienne de Clare souhaite faire part à la province de la Nouvelle-Écosse et elle appuie les positions de la FAD dans son mémoire de retirer du projet de la disposition permanente à la Commission de délimitation des frontières électorales de regrouper des circonscriptions non contiges, de retirer du projet de la loi la disposition permettant au comité spécial de fixer le nombre maximal et le nombre minimal de circonscriptions et de mettre sur pied, dans le plus bref délai, suite à l'adoption de la loi, ainsi amendé une commission de délimitation des frontières électorales. En conclusion, je désire rapporter à votre attention les faits que la population de la Nouvelle-Écosse est d'autour d'1 million de personnes. Cette population est représentée par 53 sièges à la législature. Selon les statistiques de 2016, plus de 95 000 personnes comprennent et utilisent le français et l'anglais en Nouvelle-Écosse. Sans compter les Français qui ont été assimilés et nos ayants droit qui ont été assimilés maintenant qui ont moins la chance de fréquenter nos écoles acadiennes. Même que les Acadiens parlent encore français, on demeure 4% de la population de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Ces chiffres démontrent qu'on devra revenir aux circonscriptions électorales protégées de 2012 afin de permettre aux Acadiens et francophones d'avoir une représentation effective dans la législature provinciale. Et cette égalité de population devra nous permettre d'avoir au moins 4 personnes qui siègent à la législature pour représenter nos 4 régions acadiennes de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Merci.
Thank you very much. Mr. D'Entremont.
Merci Hélène pour la présentation et j'ai beaucoup apprécié que tu as parlé un peu de l'assimilation de nos communautés. Même que Clare est la plus grande région acadienne en Nouvelle-Écosse, la population est en marge d'être un peu touchée des deux bords. La région de Weymouth ou la région de Yarmouth compare vraiment nos populations qui sont anglicisées ou même qui prennent les avions pour aller dans l'Ouest. Peux-tu m'expliquer pourquoi c'est important d'avoir votre propre député pour parler de l'assimilation dans la législature?
Je pense qu'on a vécu ça depuis 2012. On s'attendait, on espérait d'élire un député francophone, mais quand tu compares tout le comté de Digby puis la petite région de Clare, je veux dire, c'était pas possible. Et certainement que, sans dire aucune chose de négatif au lieu de notre représentant qui fait un très bon travail, pour nous, c'est pas la même chose. Entre Acadiens, on se parle dans notre français acadien, on connaît nos valeurs, on connaît notre histoire, on connaît notre vécu. Et quelqu'un qui n'a pas été assimilé, qui n'a pas été une minorité, il n'y a aucune manière qu'il peut comprendre qu'est-ce qu'on vit. Donc, je pense qu'il y a un grand souci de revenir à pouvoir parler avec notre député, avec notre monde, avec les gens qui nous comprennent.
Une petite idée. Quand je suis assis là, je suis assis avec toi et puis avec M. Wilson qui est juste en arrière de toi, Gordon Wilson est derrière toi. Et lui, je voulais le souligner qu'il lui fait son mieux de comprendre la réalité d'assimilation, la réalité acadienne, mais c'est un cas de Digby, donc ça ne comprend pas exactement ce que ça veut dire l'assimilation de notre langue. Donc, je remercie pour ce commentaire-là, M. Wilson.
C'est tout un vécu. Oui.
Ouais.
Ms. Roberts.
Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. Je me demande si vous avez vu un impact direct de votre représentation à niveau provincial et les services provinciaux disponibles en français. Je sais que ça, c'est un but de la fin, d'avoir plus de services, soit en santé, soit en justice, en français. Et je ne sais pas si comment, s'il y a une relation, parce que je sais en effet que Clare, la municipalité de Clare a eu plus de capacité de livrer des services en français que beaucoup d'autres communautés. Alors, j'apprécierais beaucoup vos commentaires.
Oui, on est toujours en train de regarder nos services en français parce que, étant minoritaire, nos services en français, on les obtient un petit peu à la fois. Donc, après qu'on a mis des complètes, après qu'on a fait de la pression, après qu'on arrive à avoir un petit peu, ça avance toujours. Donc, le plus gros qu'on essaye, c'est de ne pas reculer, au moins qu'on ne nous enlève pas, comme qu'on nous a enlevé nos circonscriptions, mais qu'on garde ce qu'on a, puis qu'on avance tout le temps. On sait que dans le domaine de santé, dans la région, ça avance un petit peu. On est chanceux, comme tu dis, qu'on a une municipalité qui fonctionne en français. Donc, maintenant, avec l'aide de notre municipalité, on a assuré nos médecins français qui ont été à l'Université Sainte-Anne, qui ont été faire des études en français, qui sont revenus. Donc, comme ça, les services, ça se maintient un petit peu. Mais on a loin d'avoir nos services en français. Par exemple, si tu rentres à Access Nova Scotia, à Yarmouth, il n'y a rien là qui va nous dire qu'il y a quelqu'un qui nous donne un service en français. Et quand on va parler en français à un anglophone qui sait qu'on comprend l'anglais, il se moque presque de nous autres. Et ensuite, les gens demandent pourquoi est-ce qu'elle prend tout ce temps-là quand elle est bilingue. Donc, on subit des choses tout le temps. Et c'est juste... c'est ça la réalité d'être une minorité. Mais je pense que de plus à plus, à travers la Fédération acadienne, qui est notre porte-parole, et qui représente tous les Acadiens francophones de la Nouvelle-Écosse, ceux de la région rurale et ceux de Halifax, c'est vraiment là ce qu'est notre source, et c'est vraiment la Fédération acadienne de la Nouvelle-Écosse qu'on travaille ensemble pour avancer. Et je pourrais faire le point aussi que, quand même, que la région d'Halifax a maintenant toutes les écoles. Nous autres, à la baie Sainte-Marie, on a la plus vieille école de la province parce que les écoles, on les bâtit à Halifax, parce que les ayants droit de Halifax veulent des écoles françaises. Donc, nous autres, on est pas dedans. Donc, il faut garder les représentations rurales. On a vraiment besoin, parce que la grande ville ne comprend pas nos besoins ruraux.
Merci.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question is more for a letter that we received. I just wanted to sort of underline a few things before Ms. Timut is done. So I don't know if you want to say thanks to her first.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Eileen. I just wanted to bring your attention to a letter that we received from a Mr. Roy O'Donnell. I think it was passed around in the package that you just received. And I think it's a well thought out letter. As Norbert had said earlier in his presentation, when the Effective Representation Committee came to Southwest, came to Parauba, it was partly taken over by some residents of Shelburne County. And being that I represent half of Shelburne County, the Barrington side of it, I thought it'd be great just to make sure that everyone has a copy of it. But it does talk about the effective representation for rural areas. It talks about effective representation for communities of interest, which kind of is what happened to Shelburne County when it was sort of split up, where you technically had a MLA that had been there for 100 years or more. Because of this, they ended up losing their effective representation in the area. So I just want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to read Mr. O'Donnell's letter. He makes a further suggestion that Shelburne should, of course, remain the same, and therefore it moves the problem next door, but also that no public meetings were held in Shelburne by previous Boundaries Commission. He says, I believe the citizens of Shelburne County are deserving of being part of 2 obligatory public meetings of the new Boundaries Commission. So I know that's not our issue to discuss, but maybe one for the committee later on. He makes no suggestion, I would say, to the bill itself. but he does support what has been brought forward, I believe, from the Acadian Federation and those who were here today.
Thank you, Mr. D'Entremont. Ms. Roberts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and forgive my ignorance because I rarely sit on law amendments, but I'm wondering if there is any possibility for, if anyone were in the room who wished to testify but who was not on the list, would we have the ability to do a call? I'm recognizing people who are coming here with other perspectives than the ones that we have heard already, and I would welcome if anybody wanted to speak. I don't know that anybody does.
Thank you for the question. The process is that individual speakers register. Those who have spoken have registered, but those who have not registered and wish to contribute can submit their position or thoughts in writing, and we would certainly welcome that. Ms. Ann.
Thank you, merci. So I would like to go back to my original motion, please, at this time, now that everybody has submitted their testimony.
And could you repeat the motion for the benefit of the committee and those present?
Certainly. I would like to make a motion that we send this bill back to the department for consideration of the requirements and request of the Fédération Acadienne de Nouvelle-Écosse to look at number 5CC, 5BF, to remove those, and also to consider putting Acadians on the commission so that they will be effective, and yes, those are whatever the other requests from the Fédération, but those are the main ones that I have written down. I think at this time we should respect their request and send it back to the department for consideration.
Mr. D'Entremont.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I agree that we need to push this forward another meeting so that we can all maybe regroup and provide maybe amendments brought forward. There is no real department to send this to. I know Justice is sort of the main department, but Acadian Affairs is there, African Nova Scotian Affairs is there, so there's no one department we could actually send it back to. But what I would suggest maybe, if there's a friendly amendment, that we could forward this to the next meeting of LA, and that we were able to present amendments, whether they be government amendments or opposition amendments. I don't care who does it, but you know, I think the opportunity to allow House leaders to speak to this, and of course the members of this committee to come up with a solution going forward.
Thank you, Mr. D'Entremont. Mr. Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly support Mr. D'Entremont's comments and would add that it's important today, and the reason I wanted to make sure that we heard all of those that came before we moved any motion early on, we want to be clear that the government is feels extremely important that we listen to all the stakeholders in detail. Great information has come forward today, much more to consider, and I would agree that we defer this. It comes back to a future meeting here at law amendments, and where it is in between there. You know, I don't know, but it definitely comes back to here. There's a lot more to take into consideration yet, and we want to continue to listen. We want to consider all there's to consider, because the last thing that we want to do is to have this upon another government 10 years down the road, or 5 years down the road, or 25 years down the road. We need to get it right now, and there's a lot of information to come. To Mr. Roberts' points, there may be others that wish to write as well that we may to take into some consideration, but I would certainly support that deferral to a future meeting based on that, but not back to a department. Let's keep this where it's going in the right direction with the necessary input that we need, and back to a future meeting here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Ms. Sand.
Thank you, merci. I believe this is your department, isn't it, Mr. Chair, of the Department of Justice?
It's not Department of Justice, as Mr. D'Entremont has identified. There's multiple departments that are involved in this particular discussion. And to Mr. Porter's point, it's not deferring it to a department. It would be deferring it to a future law amendments committee. And the work that would be required would engage multiple departments as it comes forward to the next law amendments.
I would like to make a point here that I believe we've heard very loudly and clearly from the Acadian community of what they exactly want. And I think that we should take that into great consideration and pay attention to their requests to remove 5CC, 5BF, make sure that there are Acadians on the commission and that their writings are represented properly this time because of the uniqueness of their culture in each of these areas. I think it is very important that we listen to them at this time, and it's been very clear to me. I don't really need much more to hear, but I believe that they are correct. So how can we move forward with this in a more timely fashion?
Thank you, Ms. Zann. And from what I've heard, I see there's consensus around the table that the voices we've heard have merit and substance. There is a desire to further those discussions, to capture the circumstances that the presenters have shared, and the process would be to defer it to law amendments, to a future law amendments meeting, and during that period, up to the point of law amendments, have the opportunity to engage multiple departments to share the points presented today and value the feedback from each of those departments. That information would come back to law amendments and subsequent discussions take place. Madam Zann.
Thank you. And so as the Minister for Justice, which is one of the main departments working on this, I can have your word that you will make sure that that happens within those departments and the discussion happens of what you have heard here today.
Yes, Ms. Zann, that would be due process for us to ensure that all departments are engaged in the discussions and circumstances that presenters brought forward today.
Thank you.
So my suggestion to your, because I did take that as a question, my suggestion would be that the amendment, the motion be to defer to a future law amendments for that purpose.
So would you like me to redo my motion?
If you would, please.
Okay. So I would make the motion that we defer this to the next law amendments. We have another law amendments committee meeting, and that we will take this back to our caucuses as well as to the departments and probably come forward with our own amendments, having listened to what we've heard here today, and make hopefully the right decision at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zann. There's a motion on the floor to defer to a future law amendments committee meeting. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. If we can recess for a few minutes and we'll reconvene shortly.
I just ask if it is possible. We do have a schedule we'd like to keep to, so if it's possible, if those that aren't a part of the next could take their conversations outside. Sorry, and thank you. Order. Order. I'd like to call the meeting of law amendments back to order, please. Thank you all very much. I'm the MLA for Claire Digby. I'll be chairing the rest of the proceedings here this evening, and I welcome everybody. So for those of you that weren't here at the starting of the proceedings earlier on, we will commence with presentations. This time we're on Bill 108, the Cannabis Control Act. So there'll be 10 minutes for presentations, 5 minutes for questions. I'd ask everybody to turn their cell phones off and be respectful to the people that are making presentations. So to start off with, we have Sharon McIntosh. Sharon, welcome. So the floor is yours. I will, if you want, I can give you a 2-minute when your time's getting close, either a verbal or a hand signal, and we'll go from there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
The floor is yours.
Thank you all for the opportunity to present to you today. I am largely going to read my presentation, simply so I make sure I get in the 10 minutes. So I worked in tobacco control for over 35 years to reduce tobacco use and its harms in Nova Scotia. So I was really delighted, and I applaud the government when I read the press release about the stated intent of Bill 108, which is to reduce smoking of any kind through smoke-free places which support a smoke-free culture and play an important role in reducing both tobacco use and exposure to secondhand smoke. We need to expand the public's protection from secondhand smoke and the normalizing of recreational cannabis and tobacco use in Nova Scotia, because we currently have the highest smoking rates in Canada at 20%. Health Canada reports that many of the harmful chemicals found in tobacco smoke are also found in cannabis smoke. And in 2009, the state of California added cannabis smoke to its list of chemicals known to cause cancer or birth defects or other reproductive harms. People exposed to secondhand cannabis smoke can have levels of THC detected in their saliva, blood, and urine. 6 provinces in Canada have already legislated that there be no cannabis use in public places. Another 3 have prohibited cannabis use in areas frequented by children. Today, I encourage you to make Nova Scotia a leader in providing protection from exposure to secondhand smoke for all Nova Scotians, particularly our children and youth. You can do this by amending Bill 108 to prohibit smoking and vaping in all outdoor spaces in Nova Scotia where people gather, or at minimum, spaces frequented by children. The Act defines outdoor public spaces as an outdoor space to which the public is ordinarily invited or permitted access, irrespective of whether a fee is charged for entry. Expanding provincial legislation in this way would make it easier for the public to comply with smoke-free outdoor spaces legislation because the rules would be clear and apply consistently across the province versus now they can vary by municipality. All Nova Scotians deserve the same protection from secondhand smoke regardless of where they live. And I happen to live in HRM, and as you may know, currently a number of our large public gathering spaces provide no protection for exposure to secondhand smoke. Examples are the Buskers Festival and the Natal Day and Canada Day events on the waterfront. So with the legislation of recreational cannabis, unless the Act is expanded to include outdoor public spaces like these spaces in HRM, my future grandchildren could be absorbing not only the harmful effects of tobacco smoke and cannabis smoke, but THC, the active ingredient in cannabis that gives you a high. This situation would also send a message to children that smoking cannabis is socially acceptable. This doesn't seem right to me, and I hope you are not willing to allow this to continue when you have the chance to improve the situation and reduce these health risks by amending this bill. In terms of public support, there's lots. 85% of Nova Scotians 15 and older don't smoke tobacco, or don't consume cannabis, and 80% don't smoke tobacco. The majority of Nova Scotians surveyed in the past support smoke-free spaces, and the majority surveyed recently also support apartment owners being able to specify no cannabis smoking or vaping in the lease. Because of the strong support for smoke-free places and the fact that the majority of Nova Scotians don't smoke tobacco or use cannabis, smoke-free legislation is largely self-enforcing when combined with adequate signage and public education about the risk of exposure to various kinds of secondhand smoke. So just to give you a little background, creating smoke-free public places, both indoors and outdoors, is a globally recognized best practice. Smoke-free places not only protect people from the harmful effects of exposure to secondhand smoke, but also serve to denormalize smoking and now cannabis. There's good evidence demonstrating that these smoking prohibitions actually help people cut down, and we know the majority of people who smoke want to quit. So having to leave the area to smoke becomes a conscious choice, and once people are used to leaving that area, it actually becomes easier for them to quit. So this act can actually help Nova Scotia reduce its high smoking rate. According to the most recent Canadian Tobacco, Alcohol and Drug Use Survey, 14% of Nova Scotians and 12% of Canadians have used cannabis in the last year. It's also common for people to mix tobacco with cannabis and smoke them together. About a third of cannabis users, and these are cannabis users who do not identify themselves as tobacco users, report mixing tobacco with their cannabis. Given the highly addictive nature of tobacco, therefore increased smoking of cannabis, especially among young people, could lead to further increased tobacco smoking. Canadian survey data also show that current smokers are more likely to try cannabis than former or never smokers. This co-use increases the risk of harm to people who smoke and undermines public health efforts to denormalize smoking behavior and to reduce smoking. Decades have been spent legislating and educating to denormalize tobacco smoking. The legislation of recreational cannabis could potentially normalize cannabis smoking and vaping, which could in turn renormalize tobacco smoking and increase our already high smoking rates. And smoking still is the #1 preventable cause of death. For these reasons, I encourage you to expand this legislation to protect all Nova Scotians from the harm of exposure to secondhand smoke and to reduce current and future tobacco use by, by prohibiting smoking and vaping tobacco and recreational cannabis in all outdoor public places throughout Nova Scotia. And in closing, if I may, I'd just like to share a little historic perspective for your consideration, having been around all those 35 years. In 1999, Nova Scotia had the highest smoking rate in Canada. And between around 2000 and 2009, the province implemented a series of strong comprehensive tobacco strategies for Nova Scotia. And in so doing, we went from being the worst in Canada to sort of in a bubble with other provinces in the mid-range. But in 2016, we're back on top. So this really is a chance through amendments of this Act to reduce tobacco use by re-educating the public about the harms of secondhand smoke. A lot of people think that issue's gone, and it's not. And also to extend protection to secondhand smoke in those places where currently we gather for our things that we advertise all across the world that will come to Nova Scotia. But it'll be exposed to secondhand smoke and recreational cannabis smoke unless the Act is amended. And lastly, by amending the Act and not having our young people see people smoking or vaping in public, we should be able to reduce both our use of tobacco. So I just want to say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. And I can certainly relate to the concerns of someone who really enjoys being outdoors in Nova Scotia in all kinds of different circumstances. But I do have a concern, and I wonder if you would have some response to it. We know that under, from what we understand from the Minister of Justice, rental property owners will be able to prohibit the smoking of cannabis in apartments, in rented accommodations. And if your if the amendments that you proposed were adopted, prohibiting use of cannabis in public places, I'm not sure what is left to individuals who do wish to use it, who rent. And so, what is your response to that? I mean,
that's a great question.
It seems like there's a concern for equity that I do have, as well as a concern for our enjoyment in public spaces.
Okay, I think two thoughts. One, I was requesting that the amendments be to limit smoking in all outdoor places where people gather. So this is not a request for streets and sidewalks. This is a place where all people gather. So the place is currently exempted, like our Buskers Festival, like our Natal Day events, like events in Grand Parade, where we come together, and in rural communities as well, for exhibitions and other events, where people are standing close together, children are present. And right now, there's no prohibition against anyone smoking anything. So that's the amendment I'm asking for.
Okay.
And with regard to your concern around equity, it actually having smoke-free multi-unit dwellings it is an equitable legislative policy because in fact so much harm is done by continued use, and we're particularly concerned about increasing use among our children and youth. So I'm pleased that more landlords are going to, and condominium corporations as well, will be able to, under both their respective acts, to choose to designate their units as smoke-free. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith-McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking this opportunity to bring up a very important topic. And I really like your approach, and that this is an opportunity to address the effects of secondhand smoke as well, and see if we can find ways of preventing the harmful effects of the secondhand smoke from cannabis. So I do applaud this amendment. And it is a real issue. And I think one of the points that this really addresses is we have laws in place right now for secondhand smoke, yet we see people standing right outside of doorways of public buildings smoking. And there's no real enforcement. I drive by the local high school and there's 50 kids out front smoking. So I think this amendment brings up an important issue, that if we're going to have laws in place, we also need to make sure that there is enforcement for both secondhand smoke laws as well as cannabis in the public.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond to that?
Yes.
I've done a lot of work in this area. I was heavily involved in the municipal smoke-free outdoor spaces work back in the around 2012 to 2014. What's critical here is not enforcement in the traditional sense, it's reinforcement. The government through Smoke-Free Nova Scotia has provided funding to create the signs you've seen around, really attractive, colorful, welcome to the smoke-free space. They're all over Nova Scotia. And they were designed, they were pre-tested with people who smoked both in HRM and in rural Nova Scotia, and the graphics and the messaging is what they wanted, and they clearly understood what's being asked. So what I'm emphasizing here is there's an opportunity with recreational cannabis to re-educate the public about the dangers of secondhand smoke, because it's been a long time since they've heard anything about it. And at the same time, perhaps for the first time, to educate them about the potential harms of cannabis smoke, especially when it's combined with tobacco smoke. And so that's why we find it's largely self-enforcing. So the town of Bridgewater, we did a pre and post test, and they had no complaints within the 1 year after implementing their smoke-free outdoor space bylaw. And so the compliance is very good. And they also had decreased smoking rates as well.
Excellent.
And decreased rates of people smoking where they shouldn't. So you're right, there'll always be people somewhere, but what we see is really important is to see that's the only way we're going to decrease over time our smoking rates in Nova Scotia, and that's when we're going to see less people on the street.
Excellent.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's great, just great comments, and I applaud you for bringing this to our attention.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McIntosh, for your presentation.
Thank
Appreciate
you very
it.
much.
Next is Kevin Russell. Kevin, welcome. So we'll give you 10 minutes for presentation. If you want, I'll give you a 2-minute warning if you want, and we'll go from there. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Actually, I won't be that long. So, Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Kevin Russell. I represent IPONS, the Investment Property Owners Association of Nova Scotia. I'm here in my capacity as IPONS Executive Director. And thank you for allowing me to speak on a topic impacting 300,000 Nova Scotian renters, a third of Nova Scotia's population. IPONS was pleasantly pleased to learn that the Cannabis Control Act contained language to allow landlords to have the choice to impose or not to impose rules and regulations prohibiting cannabis smoking and cultivation in apartment buildings. The Cannabis Control Act's Clause 35 brings much needed clarity. As such, the needs of the landlords are met, and from what I've heard from tenants, this clause meets their needs too. Therefore, IPONS is going to support the passing of the Cannabis Control Act.
Short and sweet?
Short and sweet.
Lots of time for questions. Mr. D'Entremont.
I'm just also wondering, you know, there is, of course, language in there, and I'm not certain of the exact language as it is, but is there more language that we could have, or other instances that could be covered under this? Because, I mean, not only are we talking about the consumption, the smoking aspects of it, but also the growing of it in apartments. So I'm just, you know, maybe some thoughts in around some of those things.
Yeah, good points. There is concern around the enforcement of the Act, and some issues have surfaced, but these enforcement issues are probably fall under the Residential Tenancies Act. Okay. And from my understanding on the Nova Scotia Smoke-Free Places Act, it's enforcement by Department of Environment. So I'd like to be on record that we will be, you know, hopefully opening discussions with these departments to find resolutions to our concerns, but there are concerns out there for enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Jessup.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Russell, thanks for being here today. I'm just curious, I think that it's important that there be some element of decision-making capacity for landlords with respect to whether their tenants are permitted to use or not use cannabis on their properties. And I'm wondering if your association, or I guess I'm trying to understand where it comes from, where that decision-making process or authority ultimately rests. I think, as an example, Mr. Russell, you have a building such as my own where people are permitted to smoke in it presently. Obviously not marijuana, but they're permitted to smoke in it. Would this impact, their present ability to smoke in a building that perhaps they decided to move to because it was a smoking building? Like, who gets to decide whether the ability to use or not use is possible?
If I understand your question correctly, the ball is in the landlord's court to decide if there will be to impose or not to impose the rules, and how those rules will be enforced. It will be up to the landlord, and it'll be their choice to either make it a smoke-free building or a cannabis-friendly building. So, at the end of the day, currently this has no effect on tobacco smoking. From my understanding of the Act, if you're currently a smoking building with tobacco, that will continue unless the landlord decides to follow the Residential Tenancy Act and gives 4 months prior notice to the on the anniversary date of their of the lease agreement.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Russell. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Robert McDonald. Oh, I'm sorry, Mohammed Al-Hamdi. My apologies. Hamdi.
Hamdani.
Hamdani.
You got it.
I like being corrected, and I have trouble with words. So the floor is yours. 10 minutes for presentation and 10 minutes for questions, or 5 minutes for questions.
Great. I don't think we'll take that much time either. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak here today and to the whole committee. The reason that the Lung Association in Nova Scotia would like to be here today to speak on this is that, first of all, we want to thank the government for the work that's been done on the bill. It is fairly comprehensive, and it's a complex matter that we're well aware of. However, that being said, we're here with a similar issue when it comes to the concern of public use and secondhand smoke. At the Lung Association, on a day-to-day basis, we deal with people that are suffering from lung diseases, whether it's asthma, COPD, lung cancer, and many of these are attributed to smoking and the high smoking rates that we've had over the years in the province. That being said, the province as a whole, whether various levels of government, community groups, public health advocates, have been widely recognized across the country as taking a leadership role when it came to secondhand smoke and protection. And really that's my main concern today, is protection of families, children, workers, and these people that are suffering from lung health issues and coping with them every day. Secondhand smoke can be a trigger, and flare-ups can occur when you have these types of diseases. So we're concerned about that. And we believe that every Nova Scotia deserves to breathe in clean maritime air. Well, there needs to be a great deal of research done. We know there is no safe amount of secondhand smoke. And again, we need to take this into consideration for protection purposes. And we believe that this legislation is an opportunity to be strict, and it's better to be protect at first until we know more when the research comes in and how this unfolds from a level across the provinces and in our communities. I'm now going to pass it over to my colleague, Mohammed Al-Hamdani, to talk a few more minutes on this, and thank you very much for the time.
Mr. Chair, respected Law Amendments Committee, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Not only am I representing the Lung Association, I'm also representing Smoke Free Nova Scotia as its Executive Director. First, I'd like to commend the government for the amendments that they've put forward. It is important to protect the public against secondhand smoke and vape from cannabis. And however, I do have some concerns that I'd like to echo as Mr. McDonald and Ms. McIntosh have already mentioned, that there are some gaps in the amendments. First of all, there's some level of ambiguity in terms of where the public can smoke cannabis or vape, and there are also some issues regarding the equal level of protection against secondhand smoke and vape from cannabis. We need to have that equal level of protection by proposing strong amendments at the provincial level rather than allowing for municipal variations, which is the case for the amendments in their current form. It is also important, as Ms. McIntosh has already mentioned, to make sure that we also remember that Nova Scotia has the highest smoking rates in Canada, 20% versus a national average of 16%. And Canadian youth use cannabis at a prevalence rate that is twice higher than adults. And that is concerning. So not only do we need stronger legislation when it comes to public outdoor spaces, we also need complementing policies like increasing the minimum age for using both cannabis and tobacco to 21. And the point regarding the concurrent use for tobacco and cannabis has already been made, so it's also important to remember that by proposing stronger legislations for both tobacco and cannabis will protect Nova Scotians from secondhand smoke and vape from both tobacco and cannabis. And lastly, although there is some evidence that we still need to obtain regarding the effects of secondhand smoke and vape from cannabis, it is best to take a precautionary approach and start with a more stringent approach rather than a looser one, and then revisit that approach later on. And thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Ms. Zahn?
Thank you very much for your presentation as well. And we did receive a letter, and I've been in communication with Dr. Ryan Summers, who is the Medical Officer of Health for the Northern Zone in Nova Scotia, for the Nova Scotia Health Authority. He actually lives in Truro, which I represent that riding, and he wanted to be here today, but he couldn't get in quickly enough. So he sent us a letter saying that it's his recommendation as a specialist in public health and preventative medicine that the government of Nova Scotia bans the consumption of cannabis in all public settings. And he feels that this would create that even field right across and won't leave it up to the municipalities to have to decide. So there's like a checkered, if you maybe drive from one municipality to the other, there's different rules. How are you going to know? And especially if you're young and you're getting high, I mean, they're going to not probably pay attention, and then they might get in trouble. So I think that he's very clear in what he is asking for. Would you agree that this is what you're asking for as well, to ban the consumption of cannabis in all public settings?
Yes,
You have now.
We have a medical advisory committee, and they have recommended that, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Just want to be clear about that.
Mr. McGuire?
Thank you for coming here today. I just had a quick question. One of the things that we keep hearing about the legalization of marijuana, I think there's like just kind of an undertone that it'll make it easier for the public to access if we legalize it. I would almost think that it's going to have the exact opposite effect. If you have stricter penalties for those that deal in marijuana, for those that grow more than 4 plants, I think just from people that I've spoken to that actually take part in recreational marijuana and things like that, they've said that they feel like it's going to be more difficult for them to purchase it because, now in my community it's available quite readily, as I'm sure every community around this table, and we're already seeing people less likely to sell now because they're seeing that the penalties that are coming down are much stricter. So do you think that this is actually going to cause a decrease in youth smoking marijuana? Will it stabilize or will it go up? And I'm just asking for your professional opinions.
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding your question correctly. Will stricter policy
with harsher penalties for those that deal marijuana, will it be a deterrent for them to deal there, therefore making it less easy for youth to purchase marijuana?
Okay. I would like to answer your question by drawing from a parallel. We already have evidence from the history of the tobacco legislation, with stronger legislation not having any correlation with increased contraband tobacco use. So I don't necessarily think that having stricter legislation against marijuana, recreational marijuana use will actually increase use. In fact, it should decrease use as per the evidence from the tobacco control policy for the last few decades.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Smith-McCrossan.
Mr. Chair. Thank you both for bringing this forward today. Great points. I think the points that you're making about that there is a segment of the population that need to be protected are vulnerable families, people that have COPD, asthma. We know there's no question that secondhand smoke triggers exacerbations, increases hospitalizations, and whether it's from cigarettes or whether it's from cannabis, there's no question. So thank you for bringing this forward today. It's very important, and there's no denying it. There's no denying. It's not like drinking alcohol, you're the only person that's going to feel the effects of that. If you smoke a cigarette or if you smoke marijuana, you are exposing. My husband took me to an Eagles concert a few years ago. Well, let me tell you, I was never really been exposed to a lot of marijuana, and there was no getting away from it. Like, you had no choice but to breathe in that air, and that's an extreme case. But you are exposing those around you to that air. So thank you both for bringing these important points forward.
Thank you. Mr. Jessom.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd just like either or both of our guests here today. First, I should say thank you to the Lung Association for the work that they have continued to do out in the Hammonds Plains, Lucasville area. But I do, and I've dealt a little bit with, I guess, the dialogue around public spaces or having it enclosed in private spaces with respect to alcohol consumption, and I have a personal concern that without enabling its use in a more public space, we force another illicit substance behind closed doors where it can potentially be hidden. Obviously alcohol or harder substances would have a more perhaps immediate impact than that of marijuana, but I guess the lasting impacts of marijuana, or I guess, again, my concern is that if we push it behind, if we eliminate the ability for it to be used in a public space, we push it behind closed doors. And we want to try and, if the goal is to try and minimize youth consumption, then why are we trying to push it away from a place where we can see that it's actually taking place?
Mr. McDonald?
Well, from my understanding is what you're saying is basically we don't want to be driving people indoors to be smoking as well, because that can cause concerns and health effects to children and themselves. So there is a fine line there. There's no question about that. Do I have the answer on that? I think we continue to work and want to work with community leaders on that. Multi-unit dwellings, again, we're looking to the landlords to really take a leadership role on that as well. But I do share your concern on that as well. What's the right answer? Well, maybe Mo knows.
Mr. Al-Hamdi?
Yeah.
Hamandi?
Closer.
I'm getting better. Yeah.
Al-Hamdani.
Ham like the meat, Danny like the name. Al-Hamdani.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Right. There we go.
Merci beaucoup.
Anyway, so as previously mentioned, we shouldn't worry too much about the increase in contraband use, if we put strict policies against marijuana use, and are there issues with strict marijuana legislation? Yes, but are the pros more? Definitely yes. And as one tobacco control advocate and also a drug control advocate puts it best, legalization yes, commercialization no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. And this question is for Mr. Hamdani. Thank you for the instructions. As Director of Health Initiatives with the Lung Association, you know, the Lung Association has done some innovative programs to reduce, to help people with smoking cessation. And I'm curious to know if you think that, you know, really that there's an opportunity with legalization of marijuana to do marijuana cessation programs, because now we're not talking about something that is illicit and that one can't even admit one uses and or has an issue with. I mean, I'm thinking about the running program that you pioneered a number of years ago, and which I think has had quite good success. So, what do you envision being possible, you know, following passage of this legislation?
I think it's very reasonable to assume that it's something that we will seriously consider, since it's going to shift from the realm of being an illegal drug to being a legal one. And since the mandate of the association is to help individuals who are smoking to quit smoking or reduce smoking, it certainly will fall well within our mandate, and how much investment we'll have in this kind of endeavor will depend on a couple of important things, bluntly put: public interest and funding. And when I say funding, from the appropriate sources like the government and health agencies.
Mr. McDonald?
Yeah, well, I might add to that in the fact that I think there's educational opportunities here without question. We want to look at it not only here in Nova Scotia, but from a national perspective as well, as we have lung associations in every province. So I think we definitely want to tag onto that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Al-Hamdani, appreciate it. Third time lucky. And thank you. I think I did.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Appreciate it.
Shirley Burdock. Welcome, Shirley. So we'll have 10 minutes for presentation, 5 minutes for questions. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Chairman and committee members. I represent Injury Free Nova Scotia, which is a provincial not-for-profit organization. Our mission is to reduce risk of serious injury for Nova Scotians. When the federal government first announced its intent to legalize cannabis, we got behind it. We supported it because the focus, we were told, was public safety and removing the illegal market activity surrounding it. We further supported it because we continue to believe that only by legalizing cannabis can we truly apply sound research practices to it, determining its effectiveness and managing its harms. Over the past few years, the federal government, and now our provincial one, have been working diligently to determine what pieces of the process each will govern, where costs and revenues will be experienced with legalization. And over the same time frame, we've traveled across the province into community halls of Nova Scotian communities, sharing what the credible evidence tells us and what those from other jurisdictions where they've already legalized cannabis tell us. We've listened to the concerns of our citizens, of parents, of teachers, of police officers, lawyers, judges, employers, of workers in the areas of health, of youth, of users of cannabis and non-users of cannabis. Together, we met with more than 82 organizations in the fall of 2016 and many more in the fall of 2017. In all of those meetings, there's themes that have repeated themselves. Concerns Nova Scotians have over packaged edibles, over labeling, potency, overall harms, preventing youth access, delaying first use, advertising target market, the whole issue of road safety and drug-impaired driving, legal age, price, cognitive development, and control of THC. What we know is that cannabis is a drug. It's a drug that, unlike prescription drugs, has not gone through rigorous testing to determine effectiveness and potential risks. It's a drug that when the term medical is applied to it, it lulls many Nova Scotians into thinking that it is without potential harm. We know that cannabis is a drug significantly stronger than in previous generations and one that can cause significant impairment. The impairment, when experienced by youth and within the context of the developing brain, can result in significant lifetime harms. The impairment, when experienced on our roadways or on the work site, can result in serious injuries and deaths. In preparing for a legalized cannabis environment, we look to our Nova Scotian government to put the health and safety of its citizens first. First above revenue generation, first above all. There cannot be equal priorities. By the definition of the word priority, one must come first. We support the government distribution model rather than privatization because we know that we need to take control as citizens, as taxpayers, as our government, to determine the way forward to manage the fair access of adults of legal age while minimizing the harms to our children and youth and to Nova Scotians as a whole. There would be no way to do this in a system where for-profit industry was raking in the revenue while Nova Scotians and our government were paying the costs of the harms. We have great, continuing, sizable, ongoing concern about our government's intent to co-locate cannabis and alcohol in current NSLC locations. As a province that experiences some of the highest levels of binge drinking and earliest age of first drink in the country, we have as a population an issue with alcohol. Knowing what evidence tells us about the significantly increased harms of mixing alcohol with cannabis, selling them at the same location significantly heightens potential harms. Communities have not had a say in determining where cannabis will be physically retailed. Current location announcements will have retail of cannabis near schools, hospitals, and universities. We ask for the government to direct the NSLC to do a health impact assessment on potential neighbourhoods targeted for an expanded cannabis retail market, and to set regulations regarding how close to schools and hospitals cannabis can physically be located. We also ask government to advise us of the plan to track the diverse harms and benefits from the sale of cannabis. We want to know who's responsible for all surveillance, including economic, health, public safety areas of impact. We are calling on our government, as many of the previous speakers have said, to learn from other jurisdictions that have legalized when they consistently tell us, start with tight regulations. You can always loosen some elements over time if you see evidence to support that. It is far more difficult to tighten them if your regulations are too weak. And my final comment would just be to raise concern. The power of language is so significant that I would question why we talk about recreational cannabis. We don't talk about recreational alcohol. We talk about recreational sports teams. There's recreational hockey if you're not in there to be competitive, but you're just having a good time. You're in a recreational league. Why we would talk about a drug that has not been tested to tell us what the risks are, it's an unknown, uncharted territory. But language is powerful. I see no reason why we talk about recreational cannabis, and I think that's something that we just ought to be mindful of. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Sand.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. What is your exact position then on the several people who have presented? And for instance, there's a community policing officer, Angela Downey, on behalf of the Cumberland County Municipal Alcohol and Cannabis Project, who has written to us saying that they would like to have a ban on smoking cannabis in public spaces, including sidewalks, which would be allowable under the way it is now. She writes that she recommends amending the proposed legislation to further limit the use of cannabis to private residences with a potential for more designated spaces. But she feels a complete ban on the public consumption of cannabis would provide citizens and visitors with a clear message on where cannabis can be consumed in the province. And she also then goes on to say that it's already that way in many Canadian jurisdictions, and we've heard that from other people who've written into, and I would just add that would be Newfoundland, New Brunswick, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. So what is your exact stand on banning it in public spaces?
Well, we certainly support the evidence of that the Lung Association and Smoke Free Nova Scotia and others refer to when they talk about the dangers of having it in a confined space, certainly where people gather. I also think, on behalf of our board, that we do need to be very mindful of the issue of equity. And so that's the balance, and there's no easy answer to this. It has to be a very concerted, comprehensive discussion of how do we balance the rights of adults over the age of 19 to consume the product as sold by government, and how do we make sure we're safeguarding and protecting not only vulnerable and underage individuals, but the rest of us that choose not to consume. I think we've made some great steps forward with the issue of tobacco, right? And we've made it something that's less normalized. Our concern is very much that we're backtracking and going to start, some of the conversations on media, for example, in the radio, you'd call in phone-in programs where people would say, well, you know what, it's better that I'm doing cannabis and driving than drinking, isn't it? When did it become okay to do any of these things when you're driving? You know, I would assume that it's a responsibility that requires our sobriety. So I think we need to worry about the normalization, but equity is certainly a concern. But evidence points to the fact that certainly you're getting the effects of cannabis, whether you like it or not, if you're in a constrained space and people are consuming it, smoking it. So certainly concerned there.
Thank you.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, and thank you very much for voicing what is rarely voiced in Nova Scotia, which is that we have a problem with our drinking culture, and that there's a lot of evidence for that. And now with cannabis being marketed through the NSLC, I guess I'm wondering what you see as the potential or maybe the constraints of that in terms of, earlier we talked about like maybe this is an opportunity for a second wave of work on tobacco use, but in fact marijuana is being lumped in with alcohol in where it's being marketed. So is there an opportunity, or is there no opportunity and we're even deeper in trouble in terms of talking about drinking now that we're talking about cannabis use at the NSLC? I don't know if my point is clear, but
well, I'm getting a clear point out of it, so I'll run with that. We really support the monopoly as our opportunity as citizens, as taxpayers, to say how we want the alcohol distribution to work in our province. That's our ticket. That's our opportunity. Right now, unfortunately, they're doing their best to do the one thing we've told them to do. Make us money, make us money. We don't have any kind of a health voice around the table at the NSLC when they're making their strategies, and 2012 strategic direction talks about increasing drinking among women. That's what we're going to do that. Well, revenue generation, they've done that. Is that something that we are behind as Nova Scotians. So we support the monopoly. And so when we were looking and really grateful that Nova Scotia was taking some leadership and saying, we're not giving this to private industry. We are going to be the distributors of this. We applaud that. That's a great decision. Unfortunately, we thought you were making the decision because you understood the importance of the safeguarding of public health and safety, as our Prime Minister had articulated around legalization. But housing it within the same building as you're selling alcohol does so much in terms of framing what the experience is. Right? And we've seen a lot of that where we're now having food and alcohol. So you just go from getting your food and you've got your child in your cart and now you take them into the NSLC and you get your alcohol. Well, what we're doing is we're just lessening any kind of a sense that these are drugs. And certainly what we know about the issues and real harms that get elevated if you mix cannabis and alcohol, and you have people driving to go get their products, getting those, and then getting in their vehicle. We know from other areas where they've legalized that the issue of cannabis impaired driving is very often coupled with alcohol. And our impaired driving collision rates are still significant, and they're not lowering. So we've hit this spot where we know better, everyone knows better, right? We could all articulate don't drink and drive. We remember the social marketing campaigns, you know, from our youth and beyond, but it's still happening. So we're now introducing another very potentially harmful drug, and we're putting it in the same place. We support the NSLC as monopoly because they train their people. They can train them further to understand the distinctions and make sure they ask people, you know, to show them ID. We feel great comfort in the fact that they use some rigor there, and we applaud that. So I think there is an economic case to be made for having that kind of rigor, that kind of a system put in place, but don't put it in the same location. It's just, that's where all evidence. And I went to the Road Safety Vision Zero Advocate Conference in Toronto a month ago. And when I spoke to the police chief from down in Washington State, he could not believe that we were actually going to be doing that because they're experiencing such significant issues with cannabis and alcohol impaired driving. It may be against the law, but unless you can enforce properly, and how can you ever have enough enforcement and convictions? Anyway, the cause for concern.
Thank you. Monsieur D'Entremont.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing that up because it's an interesting issue as I try to understand the NSLC standpoint on where their locations are going to be. I mean, we know that the South Shore at this point is not covered, the Valley's not covered, and Yarmouth will be the site and City will be the next site. But the interesting part that I had, and it's more for information rather than question, is that it seems the NSLC will be using the bottling your own wide locations to sort of be the site. That's where the new cannabis store will go. Well, the bottle your own wine location is in the back of the store, so you're going to have to walk through the whole store before you ever can get to the cannabis. And by the way, the sight line to Superstore is actually right there. You could look in the door and see right into the cannabis site. So I think NSLC and the government has to answer a few more of those questions on how the locations are going to work. If they have the separate entrances like the smoke stores might, that might be a little better, at least trying to get it away from the alcohol side of things. So, and I don't know if you've heard anything other than that, but.
Well, certainly the last thing we're wanting to do is to generate more people taking drugs in our province. I mean, from a population health approach, that's just a bad plan, right? We're trying to make it accessible for those that consume and are of a legal age, but we're not trying to open the doors and say, yes, we have unemployment issues here, but we've got more drugs, right? We're not trying to create new consumers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burdock.
Thank you very much.
Next is John Travis. John Traves. excuse me, I'm at strike 2, Mr. Traves, for me. Welcome. So we have 10 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for questions. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. John Traves. I am the municipal solicitor for HRM. And with me is Maggie McDonald, who is our managing director for intergovernmental affairs and a few other things. I'm not sure. So thank you very much for the chance to speak today about this proposed bill. There is a lot to unpack, and as I was listening to some of the speakers, it is challenging because so much of this bill is right, and yet there are some areas of which there are concerns for municipalities, and in particular, you know, I speak with some benefit of having spoken with the lawyers for Denver and Colorado who've gone through this exercise and have had some lessons that come out of it. And the two biggest issues that they have seen in this is smell and fire. Fire is not such an issue here, and that really relates to the production and production facilities, which are not really an issue. But the biggest message that they have come away with is very much in line with the Minister of Justice's when he introduced this bill, that the top principle is to protect the health and safety of the citizens, particularly children and youth. And secondly is, you know, maintain tight control to start, because once you let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, it's going to be next to impossible to get it back. And to that aspect, I'm here today in particular to talk a little bit about the Cannabis Working Group of UNSM's concerns, which are shared by the municipality with respect to the approach to dealing with public consumption, which is the consumption in public spaces as opposed to private spaces. Open liquor arguably harms no one but the individual who's drinking it. Cannabis, on the other hand, is secondhand smoke. You have all sorts of issues going about it. And so, you know, realistically, the view has been throughout from the municipality's perspective that we should be, you know, looking to treat and control the use of public spaces, those owned by the municipality, in the same way that the province is proposing to deal with its own public spaces. Public provincial beaches and provincial parks will be prevented from open consumption, whereas municipal streets, sidewalks, parks will have limited controls. It's going to be very challenging for a municipal bylaw officer and others to tell parents that essentially your children can't really run in the park in areas where there's no marijuana consumption except in a 20-meter circle around a playground, leaving aside the issue of how we're going to get around to enforcing that. I appreciate the challenges that the minister has, and through the department has tried to address with this legislation in terms of the public consultation, which presses towards, you know, questions around public usage. We appreciate that. The thought is, well, leave that to municipalities. The challenge with municipalities taking this on, as opposed to a provincial law, is essentially one that you will end up with a patchwork of different bylaws across the province. You will have higher than necessary costs of enforcement, and quite frankly, municipal bylaw matters do not achieve the same level of interest from policing as do provincial offences. We will have the ability under this bill to enact further restrictions through bylaw, but it does have then the potential, as I said, for a patchwork and confusion with respect to, well, where can I smoke in this jurisdiction? And if I drive anywhere outside of HRM, will the laws be the same? And how does that all play into it? To regulate cannabis, you know, as a smoke-free place it's bit is good. It is a start. Our position, our request would be a consideration that the bill be broadened to also deal with it in the same way as open liquor is dealt with, to prevent that on streets and in public places and parks. The largest, number one issue that municipalities face in legalization of marijuana from the U.S. jurisdictions that I've met and spoken with is smell. And it's, funnily enough, it is not the smoke, it's the plant growth. It is going to be a challenge, but smell is a close second in terms of smoke. and it's very persuasive. And so unlike open liquor, which is essentially in many cases carried in a bag or what have you, there is good public policy rationale for preventing open liquor. Our view is that that public policy rationale should equally apply to the consumption of marijuana in public, municipal places along those lines. So it is challenging. I think a lot of good work has been done throughout this legislation. In particular, we're very pleased to see that there will be control over retail through a monopoly. And because that leads us to one big issue that we had some concerns over, which is how do we essentially manage retail outlets popping up all over the municipality, which is what's happened in Vancouver and other jurisdictions. I think absolutely got it right. I think as well, the province has 99% of this right. The challenge is where you open up that one crack in terms of use over public spaces, which I can see why we would have gone there, in the sense of saying, look, leave it to municipalities to decide where they wish to have it. The general consensus of what I'm sensing, and I realize that this has come forward quite quickly, and UNSM is not meeting till Friday. So a lot of that is still in play, but it does come back to a desire through the working committee that one of our councillors chairs, Councillor Cleary, is that there would be consistency throughout, and that we would be treated in a similar way in which the province is treating its own public spaces in terms of the parks and the others. The last point I would raise is that the proposed legislation, to some of my friends' comments behind, doesn't address the issue of the cost to the municipality associated with cannabis legislation. HRM would appreciate further information on the plans for sharing the federal cannabis tax revenue to help address the costs we know we're going to be facing when it comes to enforcement in this. Bottom line, bylaw powers and the ability through bylaw enforcement officers do not have the same effect or enforceability as provincial offense provisions. And so we would ask that the committee give some consideration to revisiting that aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trace. Mr. McGuire.
No questions for the city? Wow. Thank you for coming here today. So you're here on behalf of HRM.
Correct.
I have a couple questions, if you don't mind. When you talk about UNSM, is there not opportunity for UNSM to meet and create a uniform policy and bylaws when it comes to marijuana? I would think that you'd want the strictest possible regulations, and if you have one municipality that's maybe loosened the reins a bit, and let's say HRM has decided that they're going to have the strictest possible regulations, then it would seem like one is inadvertently promoting marijuana use.
Right, and that is the fundamental issue, that HRM's view is that there should be the strictest regulation, and that comes from the provincial realm in terms of imposed on municipalities. Where you have a consistent practice, if one is reached, which I expect there would be, there's a lot of horsepower behind this. The challenge then becomes how that is put into practice. And so some municipalities may decide, look, we'll have that in a town square, but not in a park, and how you go and where you sort of go will still be left up to this sort of patchwork approach.
So just a quick question, I do understand the impact this is going to have on by law enforcement officers. If you could just give me a quick understanding on how the municipality makes the decision when it comes to bylaw enforcement officers. We have individuals who have called me up and have said, I just got a call about garbage in my front yard and there's a bylaw enforcement officer here. Yet we have an issue in Harrietsfield where that went decades without being checked by the bylaw enforcement officer, and has caused a greater concern to the people of those communities. So how do you actually make the difference between, how do you choose between sending someone over there because their gate is leaning too far into someone's property and not checking a potential environmental disaster?
Well, environmental disasters are a different issue. We tend to jump on those quickly.
I would say boron, sulfate, and uranium is.
Yeah. No, look, the municipality tries to respond to all complaints that, on first blush have some merit to them. We have a very robust 311 phone call system, which is supported by a call center, and those are logged in all of the calls, and then they are responded. The challenge is that the outcome that the resident may want is not necessarily supported by the bylaw or by the bylaw officer at the end of the day, but oftentimes they are, and then they lead, our goal is to bring residents into compliance. And so that is a very good question, because in the context of cannabis, where the bylaw officers are trained essentially not to lay charges, but to try and work with residents to bring them into compliance, you will have a perpetuation, frankly, in parks and other public spaces of cannabis usage, which may offend other folks. And it is that dynamic that we're trying to manage between those usage, right, and public uses and private usage.
Thank you. That was two. Ms. Smith-McCross.
Chair, thank you very much for your presentation. I have two comments I wanted to make, points. One of your comments was treated the same as the Liquor Control Act and or Open Liquor Control Act. I actually had a letter from an RCMP officer this morning asking if I would bring that forward, so I just want to reiterate that there's a lot of people that agree with you on that. He's asking for, like PEI in Ontario, to make it a public consumption, like a ban on public consumption for health reasons. So you do definitely have some support there. You also made a comment that you are supportive of NSLC and the fact that you like them being the distributors or the retail sales because it can be controlled. However, our last speaker brought up a good point that, we may have a potential conflict role when you have NSLC setting specific target marketing to increase revenue sales by targeting young women to increase their liquor consumption. Are you concerned at all that NSLC may do the same if their goal is focused on revenue production, that they may do something similar with cannabis sales?
No. I mean, number one, what I said was that I was supportive of monopoly and controls in place. I don't see any particular problem with the NSLC. I think as a municipality, our challenge would be that we would like, a conversation potentially with the NSLC around where the best location might be given our zoning and the other bits. The reality is that the province is exempt from municipal bylaws. And overall, the NSLC has a mandate around public safety as well, and I think that they're well experienced in it with liquor and everything else. I don't particularly see an issue with the NSLC. I think it's a good move.
Thank you.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wonder if you could just comment and share with the committee on the expenses that the municipality has already incurred in this kind of lead up to legalization. I certainly know that there have been complaints in my constituency as dispensaries have opened, and there's been some challenges for policing in terms of enforcing laws that aren't yet in place.
Right. Thank you for the question. So our sort of rough, and it's very challenging, and until, part of it obviously will be driven by this decision around whether it's treated like open liquor or not, as in bylaw, because we would have a lot more pressure in that way. But our estimates initially are in the $3 million range, ongoing costs annually with an upfront of about $1 million to get it started, which is not the end of the world for, a large undertaking like this. We're almost half the population of the province. It's going to be some work, but it will get done. And in that regard, we were very happy to see the federal decision in terms of the sharing of profits to drive that portion down to the province, to allow the province to underwrite some of these costs for municipalities. I think they went to a 25% profit sharing which allows, you know, the provinces then that financial ability that they wouldn't have had otherwise to help municipalities with these costs.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, quick one.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up, and sorry, I'm just not as on top of open liquor regulations as I guess I should be. So if the province went that way, then cannabis consumption would be banned on streets and sidewalks and municipal parks, and that would be enforceable by police. Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And that's not to say that, you know, we see the two of them going together in terms of the potential bylaws and Smoke-Free Places Act, you know, because I think they both need to be there, and also in terms of the open liquor. So they kind of line up. Bylaw officers will have powers, and yet, you know, the police forces, which patrol the municipality on a day-to-day basis, would have the same power that they have with respect to coming across somebody who's carrying an open can of beer, in terms of saying, right, you know, this is something which is potentially, you know, problematic for shoppers, for people that are on the street, that are around. Private property, you know what, that's it, right, great. This issue is where you are interacting with other members of the public. And, you know, the Smoke-Free Places public, you know, open area restrictions are limited to areas in front of places of employment and some other, you know, that's just as an example, right? It's not in front of every building. And so you start to look and you go, well, how is it that we can actually manage this? And, you know, fundamentally, I think the U.S. got it right in terms of saying you should be very restrictive to start before opening it up. We can always change it after the fact. I think it starts slowly, and then sort of say, well, now we'll exempt this from, you know, and may allow it to be smoked in these particular areas, and go at it that way, as opposed to saying it's available in all public spaces except provincial parks and provincial beaches, and then deal with the fallout from that. I think it should go the other way around, frankly.
Thank you. Mr. Johns, quick one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's I appreciate you bringing forward the comments, because it's somewhat ironic. It reminds me very much of when the Smoke-Free Act did come into play in 2002. Halifax Council at the time was making similar requests for the province to take a greater lead, which the province didn't at the time, and then I believe it was 3 or 4 years later ended up amending that act and taking that lead after municipalities across the province had that patchwork you spoke about. So I certainly appreciate you bringing that up today. Thank you.
And that fundamentally is, you know, the reality that we could always revisit this. I get that. I appreciate the perspective, which is try this out now, see what the municipalities do. That's a lot of effort towards something which we have some experience with around Smoke-Free Places and for other jurisdictions, in terms of saying, look, please give some consideration at a starting point anyway to allowing the police, you know, through this bit to go in that way. And you know what? This is a huge bill. There is a lot to this. This is not an easy piece to get together. To find one issue like this is really heartening, in the sense that the government has so much right on this bill, right? This is a relatively small piece. It's important to municipalities, and I think it will sort of play itself out much better if we were to bring that in as a starting point.
Thank you, and I certainly hope the members of the government are hearing that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trace.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Kate Johnson. Welcome, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you.
So the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes for presentations. We have been letting it go over a little bit, but
that's good. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. The floor is yours. So I'm Kate Johnson. I'm here representing the IWK Health Centre. We, as I'm sure you're all aware, have a mission to passionately pursue a future for a healthy future for women, children, youth, and families. So that's where our position comes from. That includes focusing on eliminating preventable causes of illness and injury in our communities. And so with that perspective in mind, we are supportive of a legislative framework for cannabis that will minimize risks and harms for Canadians, especially the most vulnerable in our population, such as children and youth. And again, from that end, we really would like to see a precautionary approach to this legislation, and we would echo what many of the presenters before us have said, which would be we would like to see a cautious, slow approach as we move forward, with the understanding that as we develop more evidence, more research is done, as we see what the outcomes of this legalization framework is, there is always an opportunity to expand or open up legislation and make it less restrictive, but as people have said before me, it's much more difficult to make it stricter. We also see cannabis regulation as an opportunity to really protect the health and safety of Nova Scotians if it's done right and done well. And there's lots of population health and public health literature to support how to do that. So one of the things that we are pleased with is we're pleased, as others have been, that the government will maintain a monopoly on retail sales. Evidence shows us that if that is done well, and if there is a strong social responsibility mandate and public health mandate, then that can go a long way to protecting the health of our population. And we are also pleased to see that there was an expansion of the Smoke-Free Places Act. But we do have concerns, as others have had before me, that we are not going far enough to eliminate public consumption of cannabis smoke. As we understand, Nova Scotia has some of the weakest public consumption policies out of all the Atlantic provinces. And we understand that one of the goals of Nova Scotia's regulatory framework was to align with Atlantic provinces. And we haven't done this with public consumption to this date. And we also have not aligned with other jurisdictions who have legalized in the past. So with the example of Colorado and Washington, those jurisdictions have also prohibited public consumption in public space, outdoor spaces. And that has been done based on the evidence for the protection of public health and public good. We have concerns also, while we're pleased to see that there are restrictions from play structures, smoke doesn't stop at the 20-meter line and has the ability to blow beyond that, especially depending on how much smoke is in an area and how many people are smoking. So that's an area that we have concerns around. As well, as I believe Sharon may have mentioned, or one of the previous presenters, 20 meters you can still see somebody smoking, and that has impacts on the normalization and the social acceptance of cannabis smoking. So as a child, you can see, if you see a lot of people smoking, you get the sense that this is socially acceptable, it's not a problem, this is what we do in our culture, and that has impacts for consumption and for use. So, and as we know, I won't go through all the statistics, we know that secondhand smoke is problematic. It has over 7,000 chemicals in it, many of them are cancer-causing, and we would like to see strong restrictions to prevent exposure to that. So we would recommend prohibiting all public consumption in outdoor spaces. We also think it's important to, in this discussion around preventing public consumption, to talk about the rights of non-smokers and people who are not smoking as well. Everyone has the right to clean air, and many people have sensitivities to scents. IWK has a strong scent-free policy within our organization, and that is again based on the health impacts of some scents. And as we know, as HRM mentioned, the smell of cannabis can be problematic and can be a nuisance, and so we have some concerns there. Yes. Just going through my notes here, make sure I've got all my points. So, right, as I mentioned, we would recommend prohibiting public consumption in all outdoor spaces. So we also have concerns related to the location and co-location of alcohol retail sales with cannabis sales. So the IWK submitted a letter in response to the initial announcement regarding co-location in January of this year, stating that we are deeply concerned with the co-location of alcohol and cannabis. That is based on the federal task force recommendations that alcohol and cannabis not be co-located, given the increased health and social impacts that co-location can have. And Nova Scotia is the only province that's moving forward with this model, and there's a reason for that. It's not recommended. Co-location will expose non-cannabis users to in-store marketing and advertising, and will increase access, convenience, and purchase opportunities to either substance. And there are many people who may be trying to abstain or stay away from one or the other substance, and that creates issues for them. Co-location can also imply that regulators condone or even encourage co-use, which has been shown to compound and magnify the risk of use of either substance. We know that using alcohol and cannabis magnifies the impacts of using one or the other independently. So we strongly urge an amendment to this that would see that cannabis is not co-located within alcohol retail outlets. And again, it seems that we understand that there are challenges in implementing this regulatory framework in the timeframes that we have, and that, as far as I understand, some of the reasons for choosing to co-locate is logistics, but there are implications for that, and we wish you to reconsider that position. So we're also concerned that there are no limits or restrictions on the number and location of retail outlets. While we're glad that the NSLs, or that there is a government monopoly on sales, at this point, there's no ability for communities or municipalities or people who live in communities to make decisions regarding where stores are located and how many are located within their area. That responsibility is held within the NSLC itself. And what that means right now is that sometimes there are locations that are close to grocery stores or attached to grocery stores, in many cases, and places where other children and youth frequent, which again is a concern for us. We would like to see, as I believe was mentioned previously, a requirement for a health impact assessment to be conducted before establishing any retail outlets related to cannabis. This is a tool that has been used in other areas for other issues and can help help decision makers gain an understanding of what the unintended health impacts and social impacts can be of decisions. We also recommend setting strict limits on the number of retail locations allowed within our communities, as well as setting limits with minimum distances set between places where children and youth frequent. So including grocery stores and daycares, schools, that sort of thing. So on a personal note, I'm also a parent. I have a toddler. She's gonna be 3 this week. And in my professional role, we want to protect the health and safety of children and youth, and as a parent, I am deeply concerned about that. So we hope, from the IWK's perspective and also from my personal perspective, that you consider the proposed amendments that we made.
Thank you very much. Mr. McGuire.
Thank you for coming here today. I'm just trying to gather as much information as possible. I do have some concerns about secondhand smoke, obviously. I think we all do. One of the things it almost seems like marijuana has been legalized now for a long time. Whether it's been actually legalized or it's just nobody's actually doing anything about it. My partner and I like to call our children free-range children because, we let them play outside and they do all kinds of stuff and they hurt and they make their own decisions and all that stuff, and we feel like how we parent. We feel like it's good, even at a young age, to allow them to make their own decisions. One of the things that we kept running into was we have a rental property next to us, and our neighbors would stand outside and smoke marijuana, and that would just kind of drift over into our yard. And that was one of the few times that we actually took our children inside, because my son is 4.5 now, and he calls it the funky smell. That's what he says, right? So he always says, Daddy wants that funky smell. So so I understand it from a parent and from a parent standpoint, but one of the concerns that I have about restricting marijuana everywhere publicly, and we've heard this a few times, and is that I think it adversely affects low-income people, because if we're going to have apartment owners who rightfully, don't want marijuana smoked in their buildings, so they ban marijuana being smoked in buildings, and then we restrict it so that you can't really smoke it anywhere publicly. If you don't own your own home, you are going to run into fines, you're going to be penalized for this. So essentially, you're almost saying to low-income people, you don't have the right to smoke this. We do, because I own my own home. So that's kind of one of the concerns that I really have, and I see that, especially some of the areas that I grew up in and live now. I think that we do have some issues with apartments, and it's actually a pretty common complaint to the MLA's office. I don't know if everyone else here has heard it, but I've heard it quite a bit, where people will call up and complain that their neighbor's smoking marijuana. But if we take the right to smoke it anywhere in public, where do they smoke it?
Yeah.
Because they're going to smoke it.
Yeah.
So do do you see what I'm?
Yes.
It's a balancing act. This is all very complicated, and
yeah.
I want to assure you that I don't think anyone on any side think this is an easy issue, and there's a lot of things to consider here, but that is also something that I don't think anyone has mentioned here yet today, is that if we restrict it so much that you can't smoke it inside or outside unless you own your own place.
Yeah, I mean, so that's true, and I think the question was brought forward earlier today in response. It's an equity issue, and the IWK is certainly concerned with the issues of equity. We're concerned more from a health perspective, though, and we know that lower income folks and people living in poverty are more at risk for issues of substance use and that sort of thing. So that would be where that would be the perspective that we would take, which is we would like to protect those folks from secondhand smoke more than provide an opportunity for them to increase their access and use of a harmful substance.
Right. So we have the highest per capita use in any province in Canada. So here in Nova Scotia, there's more people per capita smoking marijuana. So unless we find a way to reduce that, then we're going to get to a point where we're penalizing low-income people. And that's kind of just, I think part of this, a big part of this is that it's an education process, and we want to educate people that that the lady earlier today corrected me for saying recreational marijuana, and I have a friend of mine who I spoke to the other night, who's actually, him and his partner are both GPs, had said to me, there's no such thing as medical marijuana either. He said, because one of the things that frustrates him the most is every time a patient comes in to see him, whether it's I'll use his terms, he said, whether it's a sore throat or hemorrhoids, they're saying, I need medical marijuana. And, I read it online. So, there's a lot to be learned from this. And so, it's not, I think there's going to be some growing pains.
There is going to be some growing pains. I mean, and I think where we go to is our past experiences with other substances. So for example, in tobacco control, the things that moved the needle in decreasing smoking rates in Nova Scotia are directly connected to our legislative regulations. So when we introduced the Smoke-Free Places Act, we saw a significant decrease in use. And when we've taken other bold legislative steps, that's when we have seen is a direct correlation with decreasing use. And so that's what we hope to see with cannabis. Regulation of cannabis has the potential, as I mentioned at the outset, to be a positive thing for decreasing consumption of this substance. It's how we do it that's important.
Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your presentation. I'm a little surprised, just because you come from the IWK, that that you didn't speak about the age at which we're selling, and of course the risks of mental illness being triggered for youth by marijuana use. And I would just welcome your comments. I mean, is that an indication? I mean, that this legislation has it right, or is it an indication that what is that an indication?
In part, an indication of just trying to keep it contained. Fair. But no, the IWK does have a position on age. We would like it to be a minimum age of at least 21. All the evidence around brain development points to an age of 25 or higher. And so, you know, doing our best to kind of balance the science and evidence around brain development with the realities of trying to move from a black market reality to not. Our recommendation would be for 21. There's a lot of evidence around, particularly from tobacco control, that moving from an age limit of 19 to 21 significantly reduces use among younger youth, if that's a way to phrase it. So from 13 to 19-year-olds, use decreases significantly because there's this issue of social connection and social sourcing. So youth, many youth who are 13 to 19 often are connected with people who are, youth who are 13 to 15 are often connected to youth who are 19 years of age. Some of them are still in high school, relatives, that sort of thing. Youth who are 13 to 15 are less connected to those who are 21 years of age, and so you decrease that social sourcing fairly significantly. And on top of it, you also delay the age of first use, which, as we know, is hugely important in protecting against mental health issues and a whole host of other health issues for youth. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith-McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have to say it's so encouraging to have you here, Kate, and just to have you and the other speakers speaking about, you know, the health concerns. And it's challenging because all of us have had this mindset of say no to drugs. You know, drugs are bad, and just because the federal government have decided to make them legal, all of a sudden we're supposed to shift. And we do have a responsibility as government to make sure we have the proper laws in place, but that doesn't mean we forget that drugs are still bad and they still cause harm. And so I really appreciate you bringing forth, you know, the IWK is very well respected, and the points that you brought, the suggested amendments, I really hope that our Liberal government are listening to your points about co-location and taking a cautious, slow approach. I did want to ask you a question. If your organization has started on working on any sort of a public education awareness program, specifically on the effects of marijuana use on the unborn child, and have you given any thoughts about maybe working with our minister and the Department of Justice on making sure we have a very strong public awareness campaign specifically in that target area? Yeah, so we have a working group that is not just IWK, that's NSHA as well, who has been working on trying to gather the best evidence related to pregnancy and breastfeeding and cannabis use. And they have, that's not a public resource, that's more a resource and tool for clinicians to use to help support their patients and clients. We understand, though, that there's a substantial amount of money being invested at the federal level in resources of that nature. So at this point, we are not developing a campaign, but I think, you know, as everyone here in this room knows, we have many experts under our roof, and so would be happy to support that sort of thing. Yeah, excellent. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan?
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for your presentation. I see that we've also received a letter from somebody, Bill Sherman, the chair of the Northern Zone Community Health Boards of Nova Scotia Health Authority, and he has written that they are aligned with the IWK Health Centre, the Public Health Association of Nova Scotia, and Injury Free Nova Scotia, who we heard from earlier today. And they're talking about some recommendations coming from a public health approach as well that I haven't heard here yet today, but they're talking about, well, what we have heard was smoking and vaping of cannabis to be aligned with an existing smoke-free policy, therefore prohibiting them from being in public spaces, setting the price high enough to reduce demand and low enough to undercut the illegal market, regulations and sanctions be such that they deter cannabis use and driving, and educating, empowering, and supporting police officers on the enforcement of driving under the influence laws and Smoke-Free Places Act, and offering a concerted education to all healthcare providers. They also mention, and this is one that I haven't heard here yet today, advertising, marketing, and sponsorship of all cannabis products, and cannabis companies should be prohibited, as this could have negative impacts on children. I guess I did hear one person say something similar to that, but here's something that I thought was very interesting. Child-proof packaging be required on all products to minimize the risk of child poisoning, and a limit be placed on the types of products available to minimize the appeal to children and youth. For instance, candy, chocolate bars, cookies, other products that target children and youth. We've seen that in smoking, how the tobacco industry has really targeted youth over the years, and you know, I think it's a very sad statement. Strict guidelines and limitations on packaging be implemented to minimize the appeal to children and youth. Labels should include the health risks of using this product, as does tobacco packaging, and that retail outlets not be located close to schools, playgrounds, community centers, and other places where children and youth are in close proximity. And again, restricting cannabis products, both smoke form and edibles, to residential use only. As they conclude, they say that legal does not mean safe, and this is written on behalf of my area, Truro and Area Community Health Board, the Along the Shore, East Hants, North Shore, an area, Pictou Central, Pictou West, Pugwash, an area, Spring Hill, Oxford, Amherst and region, South Colchester, Southampton, Parsborough, Advocate and region. So this is a large swath of the northern region where I live and have a lot of my constituents, of course. So what is your comment to that?
So there was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and we're almost 10 minutes over our time. I'm respectful of that. So if you could be quick.
You would agree with? Were there issues in there
I would
that you would agree
with most of what was in there. Many of the issues that were brought forward in that relate to federal policy, and the IWK has submitted, there was a federal consultation a few months ago that the IWK submitted comment to that would line up with many of those issues. The issue of advertising and marketing is critical, but that is thankfully at this point being taken care of at the federal level. And there will be no advertising and marketing of cannabis or cannabis accessories allowed. And again, many of those other bullets fall within federal jurisdiction. But
so the public spaces one, I guess, would be provincial, right?
Is provincial, yeah.
And you agree with that one?
We agree that we should limit and prohibit consumption in public spaces.
Great, okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to hear your perspective.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. It's been a very informative session, I'm sure, for a lot of people in the gallery listening also. So that concludes our presenters for Bill 108. Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I just wanted to thank all of the presenters who took the time out of their day to present to the committee today. Certainly we heard many presentations that supported many elements of the legislation, and obviously some opinions about other elements that they think could be refined. It's certainly a complex issue, an issue in which I think over the next while we'll be learning about as this rolls out across our country. Clearly, the ministers consulted thoroughly and tried to find the best balance between the realities of medical realities and evidence that is out there, and also the social realities which exist in which the context of this legislation needs to be rolled out. We've had good advice from Colorado, and I think overall, I think we're all in agreement that for the most part, we're in agreement that we've taken a cautious approach with this legislation. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would move that we move Bill 108, the Cannabis Control Act, be referred back to the Committee of the Whole without amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There is a motion on the floor. Mr. Johns.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I don't think the PC caucus can actually probably support this, the motion that's on the floor. I think that based on the presentations that we've heard here today, as well as additional things, amendments that the caucus would like to see, we would like to, we would prefer to see this referred back to staff, deferred until staff can review the comments of the speaker, and then have it come back to law amendments at another time. So we won't be supporting moving this forward at this time.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor to move the bill back to the House without amendments. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. That completes Bill 108. If we'll give the folks, if there's a whole bunch hanging around for Bill 79, 87, 104, or 106, you can stay. If not, we'll move on now to Bill number 79, the Property Valuation Services Corporation Act, and I do not believe we have any representation for that. Is there a motion, Mr. Irvin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 79, the Property Valuation Services Corporation Act, be referred back to Committee of the Whole without amendment.
There's a motion on the floor for Bill number 79, the Property Valuation Services Act, Corporation Act amended to be moved back to the House without amendments. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. Bill number 87, the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act amended. Mr. Johns.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And the PC caucus does have a number of amendments we'd like to bring forward on this under the LAC PC 1. And I believe that's being handed out while that's happening. If I could elaborate, the basis of all the amendments is just specifically around the wording of minister versus administrator. We are proposing that we delete the word minister and substitute the word administrator, and the justification for that would be basically that we don't really know why the Minister of Fisheries needs the additional control here, that really the proposed changes would allow an administrator to do the same thing, and it does remove any possibility of political involvement or anything, so we do bring that forward.
Thank you, Mr. Johns. Any further discussion? There's a motion on the floor for an amendment, LACPC 1. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion defeated. Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that Bill number 87, the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act, be referred back to Committee Whole without amendment.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor to move the bill back without amendments. All those in favor, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. I should have said contrary-minded, sneeze. Bill 104, the Research Nova Scotia Corporation Act. I don't believe we have any representation or amendments to that. Mr. Horn.
I recommend that the Bill 104, Research Nova Scotia Corporation Act, be returned to the Committee of the Whole and without amendment.
There's a I believe the motion should be to the House. There's a motion that Bill 104, the Research Nova Scotia Corporation Act, be referred back to the House without amendments. All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried. And lastly, Bill 106, the Insurance Act amended. I don't believe we have any representation or any amendments for that act. Mr. Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that we refer Bill number 106, the Insurance Act, back to the House without amendment.
There's a motion to move the bill back to the House without amendment. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried, and that concludes law amendments for today. We're now stand adjourned.